welcome everybody to the March 8th meeting. We had a good meeting on our last meeting, the December 8th, and we're able to hear from several citizens, which was good. And I just wanted to make sure that they knew that we appreciated their comments and sharing their stories with us. Today we'll be receiving updates from several different parts of the program, and because this is a telephone conference, it gets a little tricky sometimes to figure out who is talking. So what I would request is that as you begin with your question or your comment, that you always start with your name, say your name, and then go ahead with your question or your comment. That makes it a little bit easier for minute taking as well. And then I just wanted to do a quick roll call so everyone knows who's on the line. And I'll start. I'm Beth Luthi, and I represent the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners. And then Kathleen, do you want to go next?
Daphne, I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner and professor at George Mason University.
Thank you. And Cody?
Cody Meissner, I'm a pediatric infectious disease person from Tufts Medical Center.
Thank you. And Tina?
Hi, I'm a pediatric infectious disease physician at Northwestern Medical School in Chicago, representing AAP.
Thank you. Martha?
Hi, it's Martha Toomey. I'm a parent rep of a son who was vaccine injured and won his case in the court.
Thanks, Martha. And then John?
Yes, hi, good morning. I am John Howie, and I am the Petitioners Council's representative.
Thank you, John. And Dino?
I'm Dino Sangiamo. I'm an attorney. I am the member whose practice includes the representation of manufacturers of vaccines.
Thank you, Dino. And hopefully Alexandra Stewart will be able to join us shortly. What I would like to start with is public comment on agenda items. Operator, are you able to facilitate that for us?
Beth?
Yes.
Before we do public comment, can we go around the room here and introduce who's in the room listening?
Please, that would actually be so helpful.
Okay.
This is Nori Nair, Division Director for the Division of Injury Compensation Programs.
Catherine Reeves from the Department of Justice. Andrea Davey from the HHS Office of the General Counsel. That's it, Beth. I think we can get started with the public comment.
And Tom is on the line, right?
Hi, this is Tom Shimabukuro. I'm with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
And Valerie as well.
Valerie Marshall, representing the Food and Drug Administration.
So great to hear all of your voices. All right, so in going off of the agenda as it is currently laid out, the next item of business is public comment on agenda items. So we would ask the public, as they are commenting, to remember that this section of the agenda is just comments on agenda items. And then also, to help us out, if the public would please state their name before their comment. That would be super helpful.
Thank you. If you have a comment, please press star 1. Please unmute your phone and record your name slowly and clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your comment. Again, that is star 1. One moment. One moment for our first comment. Our first question comes from Teresa Rangham. Thank you. Your line is open, and please state your affiliation.
Good morning. I'm Teresa Rangham. I'm the Executive Director for the National Vaccine Information Center. I had a few comments with regard to the agenda. I was reviewing the minutes, and I want to thank Andrea Herzog for getting materials up so the public can view them in advance. I'd like to ask for some corrections. When I offer a comment, it's not as myself, and I'm not endorsing anything. I'm just the executive director for the National Vaccine Information Center, and I'm encouraging the ACCV to listen to our guidance as an organization of standing who had something to do with the 1986 law that created this committee or this commission. With regard to some of my comments on the agenda last time that are recorded in the minutes, I wanted to clarify what I actually said, which was because there were so many petitions to add injuries to the vaccine injury table. I appreciate the efforts of HRSA in presenting the Commission with information that they have around those petitions. My comment with regard to the IOM was simply that when representatives from HRSA present information in this regard, I think it would be helpful for the Commission to know how the IOM actually graded the study. I think there are studies being used during these presentations, and the IOM has a hand in evaluating causality and the quality of science that they review in making their causality determinations. And for the majority, as this Commission knows, for the majority of vaccine adverse events that the IOM has reviewed, there's simply a lack of quality research or an absence of research. And it would be helpful, I think, to the Commission to understand how the data that's being presented by HRSA in this regard has been evaluated by the IOM, if it has been, if it was reviewed, just to create a fuller knowledge base and informed decision-making by the Commission. So that's not really reflected in the minutes. The other item that I think needs clarity, and I commented on this at the beginning of last meeting on the agenda public comment, as well as throughout the public comments that the Commission put in place after each presentation for petitions for additions to the vaccine injury table. And that's simply this, and I think the public comments support some of this. There were people on the phone who had submitted information and wanted to put forward their side. And while I know the law is silent to a process on how that's to proceed, that the law simply says, someone can petition for an addition to the VIT, and HRSA, must respond. For the fullness of evaluation by the committee, it would be nice if there was some sort of process where, HRSA got to present their information, their data, and then the reasoning and the data used to submit the petition by the public, that they also got an equal opportunity. I don't think that's really accurately reflected in my comments. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to comment and the care with which the Commission took public comments for each addition to the VIT. I thought it was very thoughtful. It's a hotly debated issue, and I think it's good that the Commission encouraged comment on each of those additions. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. We have no other questions at this time.
All right. Well, let's get down to some business. I am looking on the agenda, and the third item on the agenda is that we need a nomination and a vote for an ACCV chair and a vice chair. And in order to do this, what we need is a nomination, and then we also need to hold a vote after we have our nominations. And I would like to start and nominate Cody to be the vice chair of the commission. Are there any objections to that nomination? Hearing none, and then Cody, would you be accepting of that nomination?
Thank you, Beth. Yes, I'd be very pleased to participate.
Thank you. Any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, let's move to chair. Are there any nominations for chair?
This is Martha. I think it's kind of, I hate to embarrass you, Beth, but would you be willing to accept a nomination?
I would.
Well, there you go. I nominate Beth.
Then there you go. You're so funny. Are there any objections to that nomination? All right. Hearing none, Annie, I'm going to need to defer to you for just a moment. With only one nomination for chair and one nomination for vice chair, I would assume that we still need to hold an official vote. Would that be correct?
Yes, Beth, that's correct.
All right, then let's go ahead and start with chair, and that would be my nomination for chair. And let me kind of come through the list. So let's start with Kathleen. I just need to know if you're in support or opposition to the nomination of me to chair.
I'm in support.
And Cody?
Yes.
And Tina?
Yes.
And Martha?
I move a nomination that it's unanimous and that we should move forward.
Well, then John and Dino would feel left out. John?
Yes, that's right.
I would second Martha's motion.
And I only have one left. Dino?
Yes, I'm in support.
Is Alexandra on the line? Has she joined us? All right, let's move on to vice chair. So the vice chair nominee is Cody Meisner, and I guess I need to back up, Annie, because I would vote for myself as well. Let's move forward. All right, so we'll do a quick vote on vice chair for Cody, and I'll go first. I support that nomination. Kathleen?
I support it.
Cody?
It seems to me I have a conflict of interest, but do it.
Tina?
I support it.
Martha?
I support it.
John?
I'm in support.
And Dino?
I support it.
All right, we can move on to our next item of business. Thank you. And thank you for your trust, all of you. Let's discuss the December 2017 minutes. We need an approval, but I just wanted to discuss for just a moment the comment that was made by Teresa. I was jotting them down as she was speaking, and was wondering, Annie, were you able to find any specific places in the minutes where a change would be needed?
Well, I think we'd have to go back and look at the transcript. So my suggestion would be to defer approving the minutes until the June meeting, so we can go back and look what was presented in the minutes, look at the transcript, and listen to the recording, and then modify them if need be.
Okay.
This is Martha. I read through the minutes, and I had asked several times. I thought I was rather insistent in the last meeting in December. I asked several times where these reports that we were basing our votes came from and who paid for them. and that's not reflected in the meeting. I was really quite, you might not remember this, but I was really quite concerned by where these reports are coming from and why they didn't include things that, I mean, I'm not even a doctor, and I knew that some of these reports were not inclusive. So that's not reflected in the meeting, that I was pretty persistent about asking it several times.
Martha, can you just, off the top of your head, can you think of any specific examples where we'd be able to find an example quickly
the
in the
conversation about adding ticks as a vaccine injury, I was pretty insistent about that because my son has ticks and has vaccine injury, and I asked about the reports on that. You might not remember, but I was pretty, I'm not sure what the word is, but in the December meeting, I was very disappointed by, I voted against everyone. I voted for the opposite option of everyone else, because I didn't think we had enough medical research, and we definitely did not have enough research from about Panda and that autoimmune problem. I just didn't think we had enough information, and I questioned several times, where did this information come from and who paid for it?
Okay.
I was a skeptic.
Good. So I just want to restate and make sure I have it right. So the concern that needs to be reflected in the minutes is that there were questions on the research reports that were provided, and you wanted additional information on perhaps who had funded those studies. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
and why they were so minimal. There was a minimalism to the. We did not get. I mean, once again, I'm hardly a professional. I'm just out here in the world where people have PANS and Panda and vaccine injuries, and I was flabbergasted by the conversation in December that some of the members didn't seem to know what a widespread, it's a widespread epidemic, and I don't know, I mean, I was just flabbergasted. That's the only word I can think about in the December meeting. I couldn't understand the dismissive nature of some of these votes. And I thought I had kind of made myself pretty clear. I cried. I was pretty upset.
Yeah. You certainly have a unique point of view.
Well, I'm just like any other parent. I'm just like Joel Troyer or anyone else who called in and talked about their issue.
Yeah.
And I don't live in a bubble. I live in an open world where people have injuries. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I do think that point of view would need to be fairly represented in the minutes, for sure. Annie,
and I don't see that in the minutes. I don't see that in the minutes.
Would that be resolved, Annie, with the same, in the same way that we would go back and listen for Teresa Ringham's comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Beth, this is Cody. Can I make a response to that?
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that Dr. Nair did a very good presentation on reviewing the provisions of the guiding principles for adding to the table. And I agree with Martha that there's not a lot of data because there just isn't any data regarding pandas and vaccines, for example. But I don't, I think we carefully followed the guiding principles in the charter. So I mean, if there isn't any, or if there's very little data, you can't make it up. So I'm not quite sure what Martha is saying.
This is Martha. What I'm saying is we shouldn't have voted on any of it, that we should have said to somebody, get me more data, and then ask for. We can't continue this there's no data on it. There is data. People are standing right waiting to be, we're not spending money on the correct amount of study, of medical study. There are thousands of children with PANDA. There's thousands of children with tics. It's an epidemic of neurological activity out there, and we are not following through on, we should just have said there's not enough data. And my questioning, the minimal research that we were given was that I know just in my own little life, as limited as it is, I know people who have children who have problems that, the neurologists are trying to find research money. And I think that one of the things that we need to do is maybe our guidelines are not reflecting the fact that we have an epidemic. And
well, Martha, can I just make a comment? I
go
think, first of all, people are not denying the issue of PANDAS, although there are many people in the medical community who don't think it exists. But that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that there's no evidence of an association between immunizations and PANDAS.
And I'm saying that we should ask as a commission for additional funding so that we can get more information. There's just not enough information on a lot of things.
Right, but if we, to spend money on activities that are unlikely to be fruitful, gets into a difficult
try telling a mother who has a child with PANDA that researching their family is not going to be fruitful.
So this is Beth. I think, so there are a couple of things here that need to be addressed. The first of which is in the minutes from the December 2017 meeting that Martha's concerns and statements are adequately represented in the minutes. So that right there, I think, would have us table approval of the minutes at this point so that Annie and her group has the time to listen through and to make sure that those things are readily apparent in the minutes, both what Teresa had to say and then Martha. And then the other thing that I think is when we get towards the end of today and we start talking about new business, I think we need to think carefully as we're listening to presentations today on what sort of subcommittees need to be formed so that we can go to work, and would just ask everyone as they're listening today to please keep a list and jot down some ideas for things that the commission would like additional information on or additional presentations for, and what action items we need to work on, whether that be as a whole committee or as a subcommittee. Is that okay that we table right now the minutes and revisit those after Annie has had a chance to go through them?
I think that's a good idea, Beth.
Okay.
Martha. Good thinking.
All right. No objections to tabling the minutes?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So Dr. Nair, are you ready for the first report from the Division of Injury Compensation?
Good morning. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to give you this update, and congratulations to our new chair and vice chair on their election. So today's meeting, basically, you'll hear my update on the VICP activities. You'll receive an update from the Department of Justice Vaccine Litigation Office, and then there'll be updates from our ex officio members, including the FDA, CDC, NIH, and the National Vaccine Program Office. So to start off, I wanted to discuss the number of petitions that have been filed. This is up to date as of March 1st, 2018. And just recall that the federal fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. And so what this slide reflects is the average annual number of petitions, basically in the time period from 2008 to 2012. The average annual number of petitions that were filed was 410. By 2013, that number had raised to 504. And you can see a continual increase throughout the subsequent years. By the time we get to 2016, we were up to over 1,000 claims that have been filed. And in last fiscal year, 2017, we had 1,243. So a dramatic increase in this relatively brief time period. Thus far, as of March 1st, we've received 496 petitions that have been filed. And the next slide graphically reflects the increase in number of claims. These are non-autism claims that are reflected on this slide. And you can see the increase from the early 2000s up until 2017, where we received over 1,200 cases. So this sort of steep climb in the number of cases that have been received in non-autism claims. Moving on to slide 5, this shows the 5-year trend in the number of claims filed versus administrative funding. So in the leftmost column, you'll see the fiscal year for 2013. We had 504 claims that were filed. Our administrative funding, and I want to point out, this is our funding for us at HRSA. Of course, the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program consists of HRSA. It also consists of the Department of Justice and the court. So I'm just discussing funding for here in HRSA to administer our section of the program. And that was $6.48 million, and this is appropriated by Congress. In 2014, we actually had a slight decrease in the funding, but our number of claims had increased 26% to 633. In 2015, the number of claims filed had increased to 803. That's a 27% increase from the previous year, and the administrative funding had increased 16% to $7.5 million. In 2016, we had a rather large jump, a 39% increase from the previous year, but you can see over a doubling from 2013. So we had over 1,000 claims filed in that fiscal year. Our administrative funding stayed level at $7.5 million. And last year, at 2017, we had an 11% increase from the previous year. Our administrative funding was bumped 3%, $7.75 million. And so the next slide talks about the number of claims that are awaiting review. You sort of see this discrepancy in the resources that are available to us versus this increase in claims. And that has resulted in a number of claims that are awaiting review. And this started in fiscal year 2017. And again, this only reflects our process here at HRSA. And basically, what it shows is at the end of that fiscal year, we had 394 claims that are awaiting review. That means these are claims that were filed that had medical records, but we didn't have the staffing to review those, and they basically sat in a waiting queue. Thus far in this fiscal year, 2018, we have another 145 claims that have been added. So the total right now is 539 claims that are awaiting review. And again, these are claims that have been filed with medical records, but we simply don't have the resources to deal with them. And it's first come, first serve. As a medical review is completed, then we assign another one. So, but this backlog is continuing to increase for this fiscal year. So moving on to award amounts, and we've covered this in previous presentations. So I'll just say from fiscal year 2017, petitioners' awards were slightly over $250 million. Attorneys' fees and costs were $29.8 million. This fiscal year thus far, and this is up to date as of March 1st, so we're talking period from October 1st, 2017 to March 1st, 2018, petitioner awards have totaled $81 million, and the sorry, my slides are moving on their own. We have a ghost. But And the petitioner's awards are $12 million. And so the number of adjudications as of March 1st, 2018. Again, these numbers have been shared in previous presentations. We had, for FY17, 696 cases were compensable, and then 181 were dismissed for a total of 877. For this fiscal year, we have 186 that are compensable, 86 have been dismissed, and the total is 272. And moving on to adjudication categories, and these are non-autism claims, and this period covers fiscal year 2017 to 2018, and I'll review the 2017 data. We had 696 claims that were compensable. Of those, 183, 26% were through concession, 46 or 7% were through court decision, and 467 or 67% were through negotiated settlement. 173 were non-compensable. So the adjudication total for fiscal year 2017 is 869. For FY 2018, we've had 186 cases compensable, 67 concessions, 22 court decisions, and 97 settlements. 62 have been non-compensable. The adjudication total is 248. So what this slide reflects is that majority of non-autism claims that have been filed have been compensated, roughly two-thirds in recent years have received compensation, and the majority of those have been through a negotiated settlement. And the Vaccine Injury Compensation Trust Fund, the balance as of the end of 2017, December 31st, was $3.7 billion. The excise tax revenue was $59 million from October 1st to December 31st. In that time period, the interest on investments was nearly $16 million for a total income of $75 million. And the interest as a percentage of total income was 21%. Some other activities that we've been involved with, the implementation of the maternal immunization provisions, as we've discussed. There was change to the legislation so that now that vaccines that are recommended for routine use in pregnant women are covered by our program, and a notice of proposed rulemaking announcing the revisions to the table is currently under review. And we're continuing to do outreach to different stakeholders, and we did give a presentation to the Biotechnology Information Organization and a presentation to the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health that gave an overview of our program. And of course, you can find more information about ACCV meetings on the website. And wanted to share our contact information for public comment or participation in the commission meetings. And to conclude, if you wanted to learn more about our agency, HRSA, we, in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, our division is just a small part of HRSA. HRSA is involved in a large array of different health programs, including poison control and community health centers and organ transplantation, a lot of great activities, and you can sign up for the HRSA e-news to learn more about these, or through these various social media platforms. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Nair. This is Beth. I think I would like to start just with a point of clarification. So the average number of cases from 2008 to 2012 was 410. For fiscal year 2018, it's 496, which you said was an increase in the number of cases. And then on a separate slide, you mentioned that there were 539 cases that were filed, but we're lacking resources, so at this point they're in the queue, creating a backlog. So I was just wondering, these are two different issues. So on the one hand, claim numbers are on the rise for fiscal year 2018, higher than they have been at least from 2008 to 2012. And then a second problem is that the cases there's a bit of a backlog, so there's a delay in hearing the cases. So there's two problems.
Yeah, so Thanks for that. It's an excellent question. So just to re-review, we're continuing to see claims, an increase in claims that have been filed, to the point that and this is sort of reflected in I think slide 5 of the presentation. By 2017, we'd received over 1,200 claims filed, and as opposed to 2013 where we had 500 filed. So we're continuing to see this increase. 2018, those numbers that I reported for 2018 were partial numbers. The fiscal year started for 2018 October 1st, 2017, and then that data was up to date as of the beginning of this month. So that's roughly half a year's worth of data, well, a little bit less than that, I guess. And the numbers of the backlog are a number of claims that are awaiting review by our medical team. So there's multiple steps for individuals to receive compensation before a case is adjudicated. But one of the initial steps after they filed their claim and provided medical records is for us to do a review here. And so that 539 basically reflects a number of individuals that have filed claims that are awaiting. We haven't been able to assign them for review at this point because of the increased number. Does that answer your question, Beth?
Yeah, it was really helpful. I have a follow-up. So the 539 cases that are awaiting review by the medical team,
Sure.
How many members are on the medical team, and who does that consist of?
The medical team there's two teams, an adult and a pediatric team, and we also have outside contract reviewers. And so the numbers vary to some degree, but our full-time staff is basically equivalent to what it was in 2011 in terms of the staff that we have available to review these claims.
Okay.
Dr. Nair, this is Cody, and I wonder, always interesting to see this data. I would like to, so I guess what you're saying is that all of the claims prior to 2017 have been reviewed?
That's correct. The backlog started in 2017. At that point, we did reach the tipping point. We had sort of focused on streamlining our processes and reviewing these cases as quickly as possible and expediting the review. But at a certain point, we just didn't have the resources to keep up.
Yep.
So the backlog started in FY17. The cases prior to that, from HRSA standpoint, have been reviewed if they had sufficient medical records.
Well, my comment was going to be that that's very fast in comparison to the traditional court or tort system. I mean, it takes years and years. So, I mean, for you to stay on top of it that much with such limited resources seems to me pretty impressive.
Well, thanks. And when I say we, it really was a huge team. I played a very small role in, but yeah, I'll definitely pass that along. And keeping in mind, again, we are one component of the VICP, so I'm just speaking about the HRSA part of this in terms of our review, that initial review that's performed here in HHS.
Yep. And do you have a sense of how long it takes for a claim to be adjudicated?
2 years or a little bit more.
Yeah,
2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years in general seems to be, again, the adjudication process that the court makes the ultimate decision in terms of entitlement. So that's a separate phase, but generally it's 2 to 3 years. It can be quicker for certain cases, and it can be longer for others.
But that's also pretty, I mean, it compares pretty favorably with a case that's in the regular court system.
That's my understanding. Again, I'm as a non-legal person. That's my understanding.
This is Martha. I have just a few questions. In the past couple months, some of the parents that listened in December, I've been getting some phone calls and some emails from other parents, and they wanted a clarification on something that we've clarified often, but we should probably do it again. When you say non-autism cases, that's the assumption that there are autism cases. Can you please address that, because it's confusing to the public the whole conversation about whether or not vaccines cause autism. What do we mean when we say non-autism cases? Because that implies there's autism cases. Can you address that?
Sure, yeah, thank you for that question. So in the early 2000s, there was a large number of cases that were filed that alleged that autism was caused by not only the MMR vaccine. And then there was, I want to say roughly over 5,000 claims that were filed at that time. Now, unlike these other claims that we've been getting and the other data that I've shared with you, those claims didn't undergo an individual review by our medical officers. What happened at that time is the court picked certain cases as test cases, and basically those were reviewed, and those went to a hearing in court, and the court ultimately found that the vaccines did not cause autism. And so when we present our statistics, we generally do the non-autism ones because we did have that spike of 5,000 cases in the early 2000s, but it wasn't that were filed, but it wasn't reflective of our workload in the sense that we didn't individually review each of those medical records.
Okay.
So that's why we do that. When we present sort of yearly data, is we generally focus on the non-autism alleged claims.
I see. Okay. And then, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I answered your question.
Well, it's just curious to me because there are people who have gone through the adjudication one, and they have autism, and that's something that we never seem to discuss. That there have been decisions. The court did say this person has a vaccine-related injury, vaccine-caused injury, and one of the injuries is autism. So we seem to forget that, and I would be curious to know if it's public record, how many of these adjudicated cases that are finished, how many of the people that were awarded, how many of those people have been diagnosed with autism?
We have not compensated anyone with autism.
Well, you compensated my son. He has autism.
We've not compensated, I should say, anyone whose claim alleged autism for autism. So certainly people with autism may have received compensation for other injuries.
Right. He has many other things, seizures and tics, but I guess my point is, so often the reason we're having a problem with these statistics is that autism is so amorphously, you can't, what looks like epilepsy or what looks like this or what looks like that, autism really doesn't speak to what's really going on. It just looks like autism. So it's just kind of curious to me. So that's what that was. And also, I'd like to also say what Cody said, that the staffing issues, we addressed that, 2 years ago when our lovely federal judge came and spoke about staffing issues on the legal team side. This has been a problem. Beth, you'll have to remember which meeting for me. We've been discussing staffing issues both on the master judge, how many master judges we have. This has been a problem for years. So I just wanted to point out that you are doing a great job. I agree with Cody. But that is the negotiating the settlements, is that working out? Because I remember we discussed that with several of the judges, that they were trying to settle before the court cases. Is that a big help?
Yeah, since here at HRSA we're not directly involved in the settlement negotiation, I can't really comment. My, Catherine Reed from DOJ is going to be giving a presentation later, so
right.
Some of her information that she'll share may shed a light on that.
Well, I agree with Cody that it's really quite remarkable that you do as much as you do.
This is John Howie. I've got a couple of comments I'd like to make, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, Dr. Nair, thank you for your presentation. It's always nice to be able to see these numbers. Being somebody who works in the program or represents petitioners in the program, I have a little bit different view than what I think is being presented. In response to Dr. Meisner's attempts to compare vaccine cases to traditional civil litigation cases, I really think that's an apples to oranges comparison. I say that because we as petitioners counsel are instructed to present our entire case in chief the day we file our lawsuit. So these cases are in pre-litigation for months and months and months, and some of them even years before they're ever filed. By the time these cases are filed, in theory, the petitioner has presented the large part of their argument. So it's not like a civil litigation case where somebody walks into my office and says, I got hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light, and we can file that case that day. But in vaccine injury cases, the timeline, and obviously y'all don't see this because it's not tracked, but the timeline is much longer than just what we see from the point in time when a case is filed up to conclusion. I would add to that, so back in December, what I saw was that it was taking approximately 6 months from when a case was filed to get a review complete. In a matter of 3 months, I now have a case that has been sitting over 8 months waiting for a review. It's a simple case. There's 357 pages of medical records. But obviously, at least what I see is that amount of time that it's taking to get a case reviewed is worsening from our perspective. And if we continue on this trend, we could be up to a year by the time we get to the June meeting just to get a review done. Obviously, there's significant issues with staffing, and I guess, Dr. Nair, the questions that I have are, has a determination been made as to how many reviewers are going to be needed to get this backlog back under control and prevent it from worsening in the near future, number one? Number two, are any steps being taken to add those people to the system? And number three, as Martha, I think, noted, recommendations have already been made by this committee to the Secretary to add more people. If recommendations are falling on deaf ears, what can we as a committee do to try to help move this process along? Thank you.
So, thanks for that perspective, and thank you for your question. So I think your last question, I'll take first. You know, we appreciate that the ACCV made a recommendation in 2016 to the Secretary of HHS to support the program receiving additional funds. The President's budget since FY 2018 supports increases in administrative funds for our program operations, and this has been communicated to Congress. If Congress appropriates more funding, the rate of increase in claims in the backlog may decline, but the backlog may continue without sufficient funding. I think your target of saying that the increase that your clients would have to increase in waiting time is correct. That you know, we will probably see that, unfortunately. Simply, we don't have the funding to eliminate the backlog and support the volume of incoming claims that are being filed. And I'm sorry, I think I covered your first and your third points. I don't recall the second one, though. Can you?
Well, I guess the one question, I think you covered generally three of them, but I'm not sure that, is there anything we can do as a committee to try to help with this situation other than, you know, re-encouraging the prior recommendation that has been made?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm hesitant to sort of direct the committee, the commission, what to do. I'm very hesitant, you know, that's not my role. I just really want to just be as factual as possible and provide you the information and make sure that you are aware of the direction from HRSA's perspective of where the program is going. So I think my role is to inform you, and then, you know, I would defer to the commission and your expertise and perspective to decide what direction you'd like to go.
Well, how many more full-time reviewers would be needed in your mind in order to try to fix the current problem and obviously potentially take care of, you know, any increases over the next few years? Is there a number? Is it one more reviewer, three more reviewers?
I would say, you know, what we've had, that's a great question. What I'll say is that we've had really a doubling of the number of claims that have come in, and our staffing has remained stable. So I think probably, we probably need the staffing to increase in proportion to what the caseload has.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hi, it's Dino. I had a couple questions about one of the slides. Could I ask them now?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking at slide 8. And if you look at fiscal year 2013, the number of dismissed cases is greater than the number of compensable cases by not quite a doubling, but something in that range, 1.5 to 2 times as many. And then starting in fiscal year 2014, that shifts to compensable being greater in number than dismissed, and then that gap seems to widen as you continue on to the present.
Mm-hmm.
Is that due to a change in the nature of the claims that are being filed? I'm wondering perhaps CERVA and maybe there's a lot of flu vaccine claims in there, which perhaps are getting compensated at a greater rate. Would either of those two observations be accurate, do you think?
I think that's partially accurate, and I think 2013, and we can confirm this, but as you know, that there was the omnibus autism proceeding, the OAP, and my understanding is after the decision, those cases were dismissed, and some of them may have been dismissed in that fiscal year 2013, and that might be a reflection of that number.
The 2013 might be kind of an outlier, and if we went back in time many more years so that we could see some examples of years where there were not a lot of autism cases being dismissed, you think those years might look more like 2014 through the present, or are you not sure about that?
I can confirm that, but that's my sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you are correct, though. We are seeing a large proportion of adult cases. That's really the biggest driver of the increase, and a large volume of those are CERVA, alleging CERVA injuries.
Do you have any sense of, and I guess I'd make a request if it's possible to get this information maybe for a subsequent meeting, but what the rates are or what the comparison looks like of compensable to dismissed if you just limit it to childhood vaccinations?
Yeah, I don't have that information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we can get back to you. But generally, total is roughly, generally, our total compensation rate, as I mentioned, is roughly, 2/3 to 70%.
Right, right.
And someone Tamara just shared with me that if you look, and this is available on our website where it shows all the compensable, and in your meeting book as well, under tab 4, it does show the number of cases compensable and dismissed. And between 2011 and 2013 is really when a lot of the OAP cases were adjudicated and dismissed.
Okay. And then my last question is, in terms of the time necessary for review, are the CERVA cases relatively easy to review?
Yeah, I hate to say easy because if our medical officers are listening, they do is easy because they do a tough job, and that's right. One thing on a personal note that they just our entire staff keeping them up this workload. What you're not seeing is missed family events, family dinners, canceled vacations, cutting short vacations, coming back from sick leave, working on cases, even when they shouldn't, when they're on sick leave, just to keep up with this demand. But to answer your question, in general, we are able to go through, if we have records, we are able to go through CERVA cases quickly. And I know that the Chief Special Master has mentioned the Special Processing Unit, and we are able to go through those generally more quicker than some of the other alleged claims. Not always, but in general.
Give me 1 second. I might have. So on the, and I apologize if this was in effect covered, but if so, I didn't process it that way. The slide 6 shows the claims awaiting review, and the number for 2017 is 394. So that's 394 claims that were filed in 2017 that are awaiting review. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then do we know when those claims were filed? I'm sure we do not know, but I guess I'm just posing the following as to possibly irrelevant.
Yeah, they were all filed in 2017. Yeah.
Filed in 2017, but I wonder if it's possible that for not all of those filings were the medical records complete at the time of filing. I'm just ignorant on that, but I'm just kind of guessing. I'm guessing that it's not uncommon for something to be filed without the medical records all being there, and therefore perhaps it's not really ready for review. Is that possible?
That is possible. This list of claims that are awaiting review and this number includes cases where we have some type of medical record. And so they have to have some type of medical record to make it on this list. But it's not infrequent that we will look at a case and we do need some additional medical records, or the petitioner hasn't had time to get additional records, and so we wait to receive those to complete our review.
But does that mean that you would, does that mean that, let's see, what am I trying to say? Is it the physician reviewers who determine whether the set of medical records is complete enough for review? Is that how that works?
Generally, yes.
Mm-hmm. But in a perfect world, all those records would have been provided at the time of filing, so that you don't go through the perhaps multiple steps of reviewing, then determining something more is needed, and then having to request those and wait for those.
Correct. And I don't have any hard numbers, but I think the majority of claims are filed with records. On occasion, when a reviewer starts reviewing a claim, they'll realize that there's some gaps in the record that they need to complete their review. But for the most part, we are able to, once the case is assigned, to complete the review.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Martha. I just have one other question. And I'm going to ask the petitioner's attorney, do we sometimes, in order to meet the statute of limitations, do people go ahead and file without all of the medical records because we're trying to meet the statute of limitation deadline?
Yes, I think that there's multiple reasons why cases might be filed without medical records. That is clearly one of them. Other reasons I've run into is perhaps we're having a hard time getting records and we need the ability to issue a subpoena, which can't be issued until we file the suit. So we'll file a suit and ask the court for permission to issue subpoenas. But yes, there are reasons why cases might be filed without all of the records being complete.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Cody. If I may, I'd like to ask, I believe that's Mr. Howey.
Yes, sir.
I didn't quite understand your comment. It was very interesting. That is, in the civil court system, it takes longer, or it does not. What am I saying? It does not take longer than it appears to be taking here in this system. I mean, once you file a suit in the regular court system, I mean, there's usually several years. I mean, oftentimes more than 2 to 3 years, it seems. I might be misunderstanding. Could you clarify your comment just a little there?
Yes, I can. And so when we look at the amount of time it takes to get a case from start to finish in the vaccine program, that's not taking into account the fact that these cases usually spend months, if not years, in the pre-litigation phase, because we, as petitioners' counsel, are asked to file our entire case in chief the day we file our case. So when I file a vaccine injury case, I present all of my evidence, and I say, I'm done. And it's now the government's turn, the respondent's turn, to look at everything, develop its position, and ultimately decide on how it would like to proceed with the case. My point was simply, in a civil litigation case, a lot of that is done after the case is filed, thus adding to the amount of time it takes to get a case from start to finish in civil litigation. In vaccine injury cases, a lot of that work is done before the case is filed, but cases can take months, if not years, to put together before they're filed. So I don't know that you can compare the two and say, well, gee whiz, civil litigation cases take a lot longer from start to finish. I think in civil litigation cases, you're moving the starting point back and encompassing a lot of time that you don't see in vaccine injury cases because it's done before the cases are filed.
Okay, yep. Thanks for clarifying. That's interesting.
John, this is Dino. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Dino. It's okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. When you say you filed the whole case in chief at the initial filing, I gather that means you file the medical records.
Yes.
And then do you also file expert reports or something like that in addition to the medical records?
It depends on the type of case, but in some cases, yes. In the more straightforward cases, we've been instructed by the courts that, hold off on filing expert reports, let the government complete its review, and then we can make a decision as to whether to hire experts and how to proceed. Straightforward SERVA cases, for example, GBS, flu GBS cases, for example, we don't go hire experts right out the gate, but in some cases, yes.
So in the SERVA cases and the GBS flu cases, the thing that you have to file at the beginning of the suit, at the beginning of the petition, is the medical records?
Medical records, affidavits, an affidavit from our client, affidavit from other fact witnesses, that type of information.
Okay.
It could also include workers' comp files, and just basically the entire case that you intend to present to the court, other than damages.
Okay. I don't know whether I don't know how much significance to attribute to the comparison of the amount of time it takes for a case to get through the conventional civil justice system versus the compensation program. Arguably it should be shorter for the compensation program, but it seems like a lot of that information, particularly in the cases that may constitute the majority of the cases, is the kind of stuff that a plaintiff's attorney has to have in hand prior to filing the initial lawsuit.
Oh, I think that we file cases all the time in regular court without having that information and go get it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. This is Martha. As someone who was put through the ringer, I don't know if everybody has read Jeffrey's. He was injured in September of 1995, and his first compensation deposit was not made until I think it was either November 2009. It could have been the last day of October 2009. And that's a heck of a long time to spend. We did not file until right before the statute of limitation. We were with Cliff Shoemaker and Renee Gentry. But not every case is easily gone through. We won causation. We had the decision. Everything was great. And then it took, all of this is just such an amorphous time warp to me. But it took years just to go through the life care plan and to get started on support for him. So for someone who was injured in September 1995 as a 6-month-old baby and did not get any compensation until the fall of 2009, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that our case was one of the more egregious cases that they had ever seen. The chief special master actually pointed that out. So for some cases, they're very easy. They're very simple, and they go through pretty easy, and we can talk about, it took 2 years or 6 months or whatever. But it's best to remember that for parents who are going through the process, it's torture. And I don't know any parent, and I've talked to a lot who've been through the process, it is not a pleasant process. You are asking parents, and Catherine Reeves can address this, you're asking parents to be adversarial with their own government. And it is not set up as a we're all going to work on this and solve the problem together system. It's an adversarial system. The attorney that they had on the government side who questioned me in court was extraordinarily aggressive and nasty to me. to the point where I refused to answer her questions, and I asked the chief master, do I have to answer her questions? She accused me of all sorts of stuff. So I hope that is also something that we address as a commission, is have we changed our, I want to say demeanor, have we changed the way we, and the petitioner's lawyers would know this, has that changed, that feeling of being attacked by your own government when you're trying to help your child? That was the number one reason I wanted to be on the commission, was to make sure that we understood that petitioners are not the enemy. So that's just something I wanted to address. And I think it's probably addressed not by Dr. Nair, but by a few other people, probably Department of Justice.
This is Beth. Are there any other questions for Dr. Nair? Thank you, Dr. Nair.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is from Catherine Reeves.
Are you able to hear me from here?
While we're waiting for Catherine, I just wanted to point out that on the Adobe, I did see that Alexandra had joined us. Are you able, can we hear you, Alexandra? She had written in the top left-hand corner that she was listening in. So I don't know if maybe there's an issue with her login code or what's going on there, but she was listening to us for Dr. Nair's presentation. Catherine, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
All right, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Can everyone hear me all right, I hope?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So I'm going to start with my first slide. Again, my statistics are going to be slightly different than those presented by Dr. Nair because our reporting period is from November 16th of last year to February 15th of this year. So for that period of time, there were 272 petitions filed, most of which were involving claims for adults. Just for comparison purposes, I look back at the number of petitions that have been filed for the same time period a year ago, and 284 petitions that have been filed, so that's not a big difference. And obviously from the information that Dr. Nair presented, we're on track to meet or exceed the number of petitions that were filed during fiscal year 2017 at this point. As Dr. Nair pointed out, there were 496 petitions filed as of March 1st. Then the next slide just gives you stats on the petitions that have been adjudicated for the reporting period. 181 total, 142 of those, the majority were compensated. Most of those were compensated, cases that were conceded were compensated via a proffer on award of compensation. Those not conceded, 86 were resolved through negotiated settlement.
Excuse me, can you just remind me what proffer means?
Sure. A proffer is made in cases by the government where based on what our evidence supports the petitioner's damages are related to the conceded case. We also file those sometimes in cases that we haven't conceded, but the court has determined that the petitioner is entitled to compensation. So it's different than a settlement in that it's based on evidence as opposed to negotiation. But it's essentially an agreement by both parties that this is what the petitioner should get for their vaccine injury.
So how does that differ from number one? A decision awarding damages.
That would be if the court, the special master who heard the case, makes his or her own determination as to the award of compensation for petitioner. That doesn't happen very often these days because the parties are usually able to work those issues out, either through a proffer or through a negotiated settlement.
Ms. Reeves, I'd like to brag on you just a little bit because I've been saying this for years. I've always been so thankful that you put a glossary of terms in your report, and I noticed that you did it this time too. On my iPad, it's 20 and 21. You have 2 pages of glossary of terms, which are very helpful. I always like it that you do that.
Oh, well
It's in your
thank you.
appendix.
I can't take credit for that. I think that when Vince Matinowski was our deputy director, I think that was something he came up with, either he or Mark Rogers, who was deputy before he. But I will thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Well, the appendix is very helpful, so thank you. I love the terminology, you know, that you define everything.
You're welcome. And just the last stat on that, on this slide 3, is there were 39 cases that were not compensated or dismissed, and these were all non-OAP, non-omnibus autism proceeding cases. There were no decisions dismissing any OAP cases during this last reporting period, and I think that's because most of those cases have been resolved one way or the other. And just for comparison purposes, I did look back at the reporting period between November 16th, 2016 and February 15th, 2017, and there were 244 petitions adjudicated during that reporting period. So that is a larger number than what occurred, what cases were adjudicated during this reporting period. Just point that out for comparison purposes. Next slide just shows that there were 4 petitions that were voluntarily withdrawn during this reporting period. Moving on to the next slide, we did not receive any decisions from the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit during the reporting period. The next slide shows that we have 5 cases pending at the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, one of which was argued just this past Tuesday, the denial case. Next slide shows appeals that are pending at the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, appeals by petitioner. There are a lot. Let's see, I didn't count how many there were. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12. Those cases are all pending. Hopefully by the time I report to you again, we'll have some decisions in those cases. The next slide is the appeals that have been, that are pending. Oh, I'm sorry. Could we go back to that slide? I completely screwed that up. These were recently decided cases, not appeals pending at the Court of Federal Claims. So we got 12 decisions in cases during the reporting period, not pending cases. Sorry about that. Then moving on to the next slide, these are the appeals that are pending at the Court of Federal Claims that were filed by the petitioner. 5 of these cases involve entitlement issues, and 1 of these cases involves attorney fees and cost issues. And the next slide are appeals that are pending at the Court of Federal Claims that were filed by the respondent, the secretary. I wanted to mention that we omitted a case from this list, the Dominguez versus HHS case, which is also an attorney's fees and costs appeal. That is also pending at this time. And I will mention that the McCulloch case, which is one of the pending Court of Federal Claims cases, was argued this past Tuesday. So moving on to the next slide, scheduled oral arguments. Yes, McCulloch is mentioned there, and Tile, which I already stated. Anderson is being argued at the Federal Circuit on April 5th, and the McIntosh case is being argued at the Court of Federal Claims on March 22nd. And then the next group of slides, we do this every reporting period. It just shows you the adjudicated settlements. It tells you the vaccine, the alleged injury, and the time from the date that the petition was filed to the settlement, till the settlement was filed, starting with the one that took the longest to resolve, ending with the one that was resolved, ones that were resolved quickest. And then the rest of the slides are the glossary of terms that Ms. Toomey mentioned, and there is a flow chart for how our cases are litigated through the system. You can tell as we go through those slides that the settlements that most of the cases that we're seeing are still SERVA cases, followed by GBS cases, I think it's the second most common type of injury that we're seeing petitions filed for these days. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
This is Martha. I have a question about the oral arguments. Are these open to the public?
The ones at the Federal Circuit are open to the public. The ones at the Court of Federal Claims usually are not.
Okay. And is it still the case that if you go to court and you're the petitioner, is it still the case that you just have that one chance? I had 12 minutes in front of the in front of people. I didn't get very long. I had 12 minutes to state my son's case. Is that still the case, that you really just get a 12 half hour, about a half hour?
Well, I don't think that there's a, well, I know that there is not a set time that it takes for a case to be heard by the special master. Sometimes there are more than one hearing. There's more than one hearing on entitlement issues. Sometimes the court will have a fact hearing to just explore factual issues, and then there may be another hearing with expert testimony. And those hearings can last up to, an hour, a day, several days. So the time it takes for the court to hear any case on entitlement issues and or factual issues varies from case to case.
And once again, just as the parent who's been through all of this, one of the things that we resented, I have to use the word resented, is we really didn't like the way it was set up as McCord versus you, McCord versus my own government. The fact that it was set up in such a way that we felt that we were had to file against our own government really bothered us all those years, that we were paying a salary for a lawyer to hurt us, to deny us help for our child. And the whole setup of it was versus me, versus you, lawyers, and that was, I think, in the process, as we look back on it now, we're extraordinarily thankful for the monthly help that we get, extraordinarily thankful. We are blessed. But the process itself was so adversarial that we had side effects of the stress, and it was very bad. It was not a pleasant experience, and I think that that's something I'd like to address, down the line. Is if there's a way that we can make this seem less adversarial against. I mean, it's the government. You were there to help us, but not. Do you understand my thoughts on that? That was very upsetting to us.
Well, I think I may understand. I mean, honestly, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for a long time. The focus of my experience as an attorney has been as a litigator, and I completely agree with you. Litigation is stressful. It's not something that's pleasant, and especially if you are one of the parties and you are being required to provide evidence to the court on something that's very personal to you and obviously very painful. This program was established to be less adversarial, not non-adversarial, and the way it's set up is that you have to file the claim against the Secretary of Health and Human Services. There's really no other way to go about doing it, and that's because the Secretary is standing in the shoes of any other person that could be sued for the alleged injury, which before the program existed, that was vaccine manufacturers and or administrators.
Right, right.
That's why it's set up that way, and I can see why you would feel like it's not fair that you have to sue your own government to get compensation, but that's the reason it was set up that way, was to make things less adversarial. There are things about the way the program is structured that make it less adversarial. There's no discovery as of right, which are depositions, interrogatories, requests for production of documents, the things that Mr. Howey was talking about. You can file a case and then you go through all that discovery to get the evidence that you need to present your case, whereas in this program, the petitioner is required to provide documentation to support their claim from the start so that we don't have to go through all of that, which is one of the reasons it takes less time for a case to be processed in the program. The rules of evidence only very loosely apply to our proceedings, which also make the cases less adversarial because you don't hear the petitioners and respondents counsel making a lot of objections during proceedings. The special masters have an inquisitorial role, which is unusual. I mean, if you were appearing in front of a judge, the judge wouldn't be asking all the questions that you often hear special masters asking during hearings and cases. So I appreciate what you're saying, Ms. Toomey, but I have to say that I think that the way that the program is structured is designed to make it easier to proceed through our process than it would be if you were pursuing a traditional civil action. And I am sorry that you had an unpleasant experience in presenting your case.
Well, the chief master, everyone was very kind to us. The special masters were very kind to us. Eventually, we had some we had problems that were not pleasant, and it's public record. But once again, just setting this thing up as us versus, I wish that there was a more, maybe Jeff said they could at least have sent us a letter saying, I'm sorry we have to be rude to you, but this is our business. I mean, there was no kindness offered towards us. And I've heard from other people who've been through the process that if it wasn't for the petitioner, our own Cliff Shoemaker and Renee Gentry, who guided us through the whole thing, it'd be nice if the commission could come up with, I don't know what we can do, but it was, I've heard from other people that they felt very just frustrated by the whole process. So it's just something to think about. But you're right, litigation is horrible. It's just a terrible thing. But why should we have to go through that? You know, if my child had been injured by peanut butter, I wouldn't have had to have gone through so much, I wouldn't have had to have gone through litigation to prove it. Why are we making people go through so much trouble? It just seems unnecessary. I don't know. I'm on a different side from you. You know, we're looking at the same picture from different sides of the frame. So it's they're both legitimate views, but they're different. That's all.
Ms. Reeves, this is John Howie. How are you today?
I'm fine, Mr. Howie. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I was going to ask a couple of questions that are similar to the questions that I had asked Dr. Nair. I'm aware that DOJ has added some new lawyers, and I'm looking forward to working with them. Do you feel that DOJ has now gotten to a point where it has enough lawyers for the current number of cases being filed? If not, how many more lawyers do you think that need to be added, and are there plans to do that? Thank you.
Sure. The answer to your first question is no. We do not have enough attorneys to handle the number of cases that are currently pending in the program. As Dr. Nair mentioned, members of his staff having to, miss family dinners, curtail vacations, work while they're on vacation, and so forth. That's the same thing that's going on with my staff. People are working long hours, and I have people regularly saying to me, I'm taking some time off to go visit family in Florida, but I can't not work while I'm away. So is it okay if I take my laptop and work while I'm on vacation? And I always say, I really hate it that you have to do that, but if you feel that you must, absolutely, there's no problem with that. So our resources are spread very thin, as are HHS's, as are the courts. The special masters are limited to 8. That's not enough special masters to handle the cases that are pending. As far as the number of attorneys, I haven't sat down and crunched the numbers recently. I'm sure, I'll just throw out a random number. I'm sure we could use at least 10 more attorneys. And obviously, I'm always trying to figure out ways that we can hire more people, but of course, we're limited by whatever money we get in our budget. And we did get money in the omnibus bill last year that allowed us to hire 6 more attorneys who recently came on board, and we're very happy to have them on board. But again, we're still understaffed.
This is Martha. We once mentioned when we had visitors from the DOJ, we kind of got close to a conversation I'm not sure we're allowed to have, but we might want to explain we are not allowed to call a congressman or a senator as commission members. And I want to ask, well, who are the friends of this program up on Capitol Hill? And I think that we came too close to a political conversation, but can that somehow or another be explained? Who is allowed to call up Senator Kane and say and lobby on this behalf? I hate the word lobby, but who is allowed to do that, and who is doing it on behalf of petitioners? I know, are the lawyers doing it? I don't know.
Well, I'm in the same position that Dr. Nair is in. I'm a public servant, and I'm a,
right.
You're
not allowed to do
I
it.
can't lobby
Who does
Congress.
it? Who is doing it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Who is doing it? Is Teresa doing it from her? Who is calling up and trying to get congressional support for these? A lot of the conversations we have, it can't be solved. A lot of our problems can't be solved without congressional support. And who does that? Who is doing that on our behalf? And by our, I mean, petitioners' behalf.
I can't really answer that question.
Yeah, this is Narayan. Martha, thank you for that question. I don't know if I have a good answer either, other than to say that to reaffirm that we're not allowed to lobby Congress. Our role isn't really to establish policy, but to
well, I know that. We've said that over and over again for the last years, but who is allowed to do it? Who is doing it on our behalf?
Yeah, we are, we do inform Congress on our performance measures and where we're at with the program and our funding levels. So there is that goes through sort of the channels up, but otherwise, I don't know.
This is Cody. Can I ask a question about one of the slides here? And I can't see the number, but it says adjudicated settlement. Oops, it just moved. But after that's it. Thanks. HPV, Tdap, and the meningococcal vaccine, the alleged injury was Hodgkin's disease. Is that public information? Can I find somewhere what the discussion was? Because it implies that there was a settlement in an award meeting, and that's unbelievable.
If there was a settlement in the case, the decision adopting the settlement is published on the court's website, but we don't provide the specifics about these cases because of the provision in the statute that protects the privacy of the parties, other than for the only thing that's disclosed to the public is the special master's decision. But this slide we present every reporting period just to show the commission how many cases have been settled and what the nature of the claims are. But to more broadly answer your question, I've been working in this program since 1990, and I think I could say that, I don't know, it's probably too broad to say that if there's an injury or a disease, someone has filed a petition that's alleged that a vaccine has caused it, a covered vaccine. So we see all different kinds of injuries alleged, and we settle cases for all kinds of different reasons. So I can see why you would be surprised by that, but I can't provide you with any more detail than that's on that slide at the moment.
Can you tell me what all kinds of different reasons are, or is that not a public issue?
I mean, I think there's just too many for me to get into.
But that's not science.
Well, science isn't always the reason that we settle cases.
Yeah.
I understand. I mean, sometimes we settle cases because it doesn't make any sense to continue to spend the resources to litigate them.
Ouch.
Because it costs money to litigate complex scientific cases because you have to pay experts on both sides. And then we also pay attorney's fees as well to the petitioner's counsel. So sometimes we settle cases just simply because it's there's a cost benefit and a resource benefit, because as we keep saying, our resources are spread very thin.
Understood, but I suspect Dr. Tan is as uncomfortable as I am with that answer.
Yeah, I don't quite understand how those two would even be related.
So this is Narayan. You know, there's a number of reasons we settle cases, and I can't comment on a specific case, but I think the broader context is this is a medical legal program, and we sort of tell our medical team, you know, 2/3 of it is legal in the sense that there's the Department of Justice and the court. So certainly in the settlement, is there a rigorous, you know, scientific basis? Perhaps not, but understanding this is a vaccine injury compensation program, and so we do provide compensation to those, you know, 2/3, higher 70% people that file claims, recognizing that perhaps the science isn't particularly robust to support that the vaccine caused their injury. Now, the injury certainly is present, and these are individuals that have serious conditions, but the purely scientific evidence may not support that the vaccine caused that injury. But it may end up being settled for, you know, a number of different reasons that aren't tied to the science.
That may explain the increase in the number of claims, or at least part of it.
And in the settlement language, which the document that is public, there is language that says that the secretary, you know, doesn't concede that the vaccine caused the injury. That's important. But recognizing that, again, this is the vaccine injury compensation program, that's kind of the broader context.
Yeah. And I can tell you that that particular case had a very complex procedural history. As you can see, it was pending for 6 years and 7 months before it was finally settled. So it's not the norm.
But, okay, and I don't want to prolong it, but I can look at number 3, DTAP, and alleged injury is a head injury?
Yeah, well, like I said, we settle cases for all different kinds of reasons.
Cody, this is Tom at CDC. Yes. So I know nothing about this case, but I can tell you that there have been cases, or there have been events. I don't know about cases. There have been events where an individual received a vaccine, had a syncopal episode, fell, and injured themselves. So that does happen.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the list here includes alleged injuries. It may not be the injury that actually resulted in the compensation, but what they alleged. And that may be, again, I don't want to comment on any certain case or anything, but occasionally we do have syncope events that result in a head injury and meet the severity criteria. An individual gets.
Okay, so thank you both. Yes.
Are there any final questions for Catherine? Thank you, Catherine. Okay, Tom, I believe you're next.
Okay, and I think, Annie, I'll cue you to advance the slides. I'll let you or let somebody else control that in case there are people who just have the PDFs.
Okay.
All right. So good morning. This is Tom Shimabukuro. I'm with the Immunization Safety Office at CDC, and I'll be giving you a pretty brief agency update this morning. Next slide. Next slide. So presentation really includes 2 topics: updates from the February 2018 meeting of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and then some selected publications. The presentations for ACIP and the minutes and archive posts of the live meeting will eventually be posted on the ACIP website, so you'll be able to get all that information. I just checked before this meeting, and none of those are posted yet, but they should be, you know, in the coming weeks or months. And then you should have all the PDFs of the of the publications. I'm not going to go over every publication. I'm going to pick a few ones I think are particularly relevant. Next slide. I'll start with updates from the February ACIP meeting. And the first topic I'll cover was the hepatitis vaccine session. And one of the main topics during that session was a discussion of the HEPLISAV-B vaccine, which is a recombinant adjuvanted hepatitis B vaccine, which was licensed in November 2017 and approved for use in adults 18 years of age and older. It's a 2-dose series administered a month apart. This is different than the other hepatitis vaccines, which are a 3-dose series. So during the session, ACIP conducted a grade evaluation, and grade stands for grading of recommendations, assessments, development, and evaluation. This is more or less an evidence review and a grading of the evidence to guide discussion and recommendations by the committee. And then the vote, which was approved for HEPLISAV-B, was that HEPLISAV-B is a hepatitis B vaccine that can be used to vaccinate persons age 18 years and older against infection caused by all known subtypes of hepatitis B virus. So to distill that down, HEPLISAV-B was recommended as a hepatitis B vaccine that can be administered in the age for which it is indicated for the prevention of hepatitis B. Next slide. There's also the considerations for the use of hepatitis A vaccine for post-exposure prophylaxis and international travel. And these, the language here you see was voted on and was approved. 1A, hepatitis A vaccine should be administered for post-exposure prophylaxis for all persons 12 months and older. In addition to hepatitis A vaccine, immune globulin may be administered to persons greater than 40 years old, depending on the provider's risk assessment. And hepatitis A should be administered to infants aged 6 to 11 months traveling outside the United States when protection against hepatitis A is recommended. Next slide. So in the influenza session, there were presentations on Fluarix quadrivalent vaccine and efficacy in children 6 to 35 months of age. This was basically an extension of the existing age indication for this particular vaccine. There was an influenza surveillance update for the 2017-2018 season, the current season. Some highlights from that are that it has predominantly been an H3N2 season, although there's been a little bit of an uptick in B at the time that the influenza division gave this presentation at ACIP. And influenza-like illness activity is the highest it's been since 2009. There's a presentation on interim estimates of seasonal influenza vaccine against medically attended influenza based on data from the U.S. Flu Vaccine Effectiveness Network. And the overall VE for this season at that time was 36%. And typically there'll be a presentation in June which will discuss the final VE estimates. There's also presentations on live attenuated influenza vaccine, in particular the results of a randomized trial of a new H1N1 live attenuated influenza vaccine strain in U.S. children, and then a review of literature and data on the effectiveness of LAIV. Really, the results for that trial of LAIV was that the vaccine that they tested had an immunogenicity similar to that observed in seasons prior to when LAIV had its issues with vaccine effectiveness. Next slide. So based on the data that was presented for LAIV, there was a vote on including LAIV back as a recommended influenza vaccine. So this vote was approved, and the language was for the 2018-2019 season. Immunization providers may choose to administer any licensed age-appropriate influenza vaccine, including LAIV, IIV, recombinant influenza and recombinant influenza vaccine. LAIV is an option for influenza vaccination for persons for whom it is otherwise appropriate. So just to back up a little bit, for the past couple of seasons, LAIV has not been recommended, and that was a result of a couple of seasons where there was a problem with LAIV effectiveness. Essentially, in the U.S. studies, LAIV was not effectiveness, so it was not recommended. And based on the work that the manufacturer did, it was felt that should be considered for adding LAIV back as one of the vaccines that's available. And like I said, that vote was approved. There was also a vote on a preferential recommendation for inactivated influenza vaccine over LAIV, and that was not approved. Next slide. At the human papillomavirus vaccine session, there were two safety presentations on the 9-valent HPV vaccine. So the 9-valent HPV vaccine is the only vaccine available, only vaccine being marketed in the United States. Right now, the U.S. basically transitioned from the 4-valent HPV vaccine to the 9-valent HPV vaccine a couple of years ago. And these presentations were presented safety data on essentially the first 2 years of use of 9-valent HPV. The first presentation was Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS, monitoring of 9-valent HPV vaccine from December 2014 through December 2017. I would just want to say during this time, approximately 29 million doses of 9-valent HPV vaccines were distributed in the United States. And in the VAERS data, there were no new safety signals or unexpected patterns observed. And importantly, the safety profile of 9-valent HPV is consistent with the data from pre-licensure trials and from post-licensure data on 4-valent HPV. There's also a presentation on Vaccine Safety Data Link, or VSD, rapid cycle analysis from October 2015 through December 2017. And in the RCA analysis, RCA signaled for several adverse events after 9-valent HPV. Syncope and injection site reactions signaled but were expected based on data from clinical trials and also data from post-marketing data from 4-valent HPV. Signals for allergic reaction, pancreatitis, and appendicitis were not confirmed after further evaluation in the VSD. So overall, the safety data for the first 2 years of 9-valent HPV use were reassuring. Next slide. There's a discussion on harmonization of HPV vaccination age recommendations for females and males, background and consideration, and trends in HPV-associated cancers in the U.S. 1999 to 2014. HPV-associated cancer rates are changing from 1999 to 2014. There was an increase in oropharyngeal cancer among men and women, anal cancer among men and women, and vulvar cancer, and there was decreased cervical cancer. Penile cancer and vaginal cancer were stable. Next slide. Continuing on, oropharyngeal cancer is now the most common HPV-associated cancer and increasing, particularly among males. In the future, HPV vaccines should decrease the burden of HPV-associated cancers, but it may take decades to see population-level impact due to the length of time between the initial HPV infection and the development of cancer. Next slide. The last session I'll cover was the evidence-based recommendations workgroup proposal, and the vote here is really more of a process issue. There was a vote to approve The language you see here, the evidence-based recommendations work group proposes that an evidence to recommendation framework, which was discussed at the session, be adopted and used by ACIP to support decision making. Next slide. There are also sessions on anthrax, pneumococcal, vaccines and other biologics for prevention and treatment of healthcare-associated infections, meningococcal disease, and Japanese encephalitis vaccine. So now I'll move, well actually I'll stop here and ask if there are any updates on ACIP before I move to selected publications.
Tom, this is Dino. I have one question. Slide 10, there's a reference to a decrease in the, I guess, incidence, a downward trend, I take it, in cervical cancer from 1999 to 2014.
Yes.
Was the data as presented, is it interpreted as being attributable to the vaccine, or is it the case that there's too many confounders to know what the cause is of that decrease?
I don't believe the data they had for that period, you could definitively attribute it to vaccination. There may have been other factors as well, but I think that the take-home message is really on the next slide, if you could advance.
Right.
Where, because of this long period between HPV infection and the time you can actually detect a solid organ tumor, that we may not be able to really see the population level impact for many years, if not decades.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Next slide. So this first publication is a VAERS review from Morrow et al. Assessing the safety of hepatitis B vaccination during pregnancy in VAERS. So hepatitis B vaccine is not specifically recommended for vaccination during pregnancy like inactivated influenza vaccine or Tdap. Therefore, there is limited data on the safety of hepatitis B vaccination during pregnancy. And in this review, the analysis of VAERS reports involving hepatitis B vaccination during pregnancy did not identify any new or unexpected safety concerns. Hepatitis B is an inactivated vaccine, so there's no reason to believe it would have a substantially different safety profile than other inactivated vaccines that are administered during pregnancy. Next slide. So this is a study from Lohirikar, I hope I got that right, et al. Anxiety-related adverse events following immunization, a systematic review of published clusters of illness. So this paper looked at clusters of anxiety-related reactions following vaccination. These clusters, as they indicate, occur in multiple people, tend to occur in a specific setting where large-scale vaccination is taking place, often in schools. There have been these clusters observed after HPV vaccine, and the take-home message is that these anxiety-related AFI clusters can be disruptive to vaccination programs and can reduce public trust and can impact vaccination coverage. And response efforts to restore public confidence can be resource intensive, and that healthcare providers should have training on and recognition, clinical management of these anxiety-related reactions. Next slide. I'm going to skip to the next slide. This next paper is by Beth Hibbs in our office, looking at the safety of vaccines that have been kept outside of recommended temperatures based on reports to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System from 2008 to 2012. So this paper looked at what is essentially medical errors, or errors in the storage and handling of vaccines. And so vaccines, according to the information in the package insert, should be stored at specific temperatures and can only be kept outside of those temperatures for specific periods. Otherwise, they go out of temperature, and then there can be problems with potency. And there are really two things that can happen. A vaccine can be stored at a temperature too high, or it can be stored at a temperature too low. Usually too high means it's been left out of the refrigerator, or the refrigerator, somehow the refrigeration process has broken down, the temperature setting, or a failure in power. On the other end, vaccines stored too cold typically means they've been frozen. And in this review, the reports did not indicate any substantial direct health risk from administration of vaccines kept outside of recommended temperatures. So if these vaccines were stored too hot or too cold, there did not appear to be any safety issues other than what you would normally expect from vaccines, which are the typical adverse events you would expect to see are injection site reactions and mild systemic self-limiting reactions. However, there are potential costs and risks, including vaccine wastage, possible decreased protection because of issues with potency, patient and parent inconvenience related to revaccination, and maintaining high vigilance, proper staffing, regular equipment maintenance, and having adequate auxiliary power are important components of comprehensive vaccine cold chain management. Could you go to slide 22, please? I'm skipping over some of these, but again, you should have all these PDFs. In the interest of time, I want to hit some of the highlights. This was a paper by Mike McNeil and Frank DiStefano in our office, a review looking at vaccine-associated hypersensitivity. And in this review, vaccine-associated hypersensitivity reactions are not infrequent, so these allergic reactions are not infrequent. However, serious acute onset, presumably IgE-mediated or IgG complement-mediated anaphylactic reactions, or serious delayed onset T-cell-mediated systemic reactions are considered extremely rare. And hypersensitivity can occur because of either the active component, the antigen component of the vaccine, an allergic reaction to the antigen, or one of the other components, so one of the other ingredients in the vaccine. Next slide. Could you advance to, I'm sorry, slide 25? So the Ariana et al. Was a review of quadrivalent HPV vaccine reports in the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So this data, actually, this is for 4-valent HPV. What I presented to you for ACIP was 9-valent HPV. This is for the 4-valent HPV. This looked at reports from 2009 to 2015. The first VAERS review of 4-valent HPV, the Gardasil vaccine, looked at the first 2.5 years, so from licensure into 2009. This review looked at the period after that initial review up to 2015, when the U.S. started transitioning to the 9-valent HPV vaccine. And the take-home was there were no new or unexpected safety concerns or reporting patterns for quadrivalent HPV vaccination. The safety profile of 4-valent HPV is consistent with data from pre-licensure trials and post-marketing safety data. Next slide. The last paper our cover is from Lakshmi Sukumaran in our office. This is a VSD study, infant hospitalizations and mortality after maternal vaccination. This looked at infant outcomes, specifically vaccination, specifically hospitalization or death in the first 6 months of life in the infant and mothers who had been immunized with inactivated influenza vaccine, or Tdap. So IIV and Tdap are the two vaccines that are recommended during pregnancy. And this study looked to ask the question, is there any risk to the infant in terms of hospitalization or death from maternal vaccination. And the authors found no association between vaccination during pregnancy and risk of infant hospitalization or death in the first 6 months of life. And these findings support the safety of current recommendations for influenza and Tdap vaccination during pregnancy. Next slide. So I'll be happy to take questions now on papers if there are any.
Tom, this is Martha. I have a question about, I was really interested in the Hibbs article. As you know, 350,000 people in Puerto Rico still don't have electricity, and for 4.5 months, people in the Virgin Islands didn't have electricity, and we had no backup. So I'm kind of curious to find out if the CDC works with FEMA and the FEMA Disability Office on these kind of issues where there's no power, it's a natural disaster, and how to get, for example, we needed tetanus shots and all sorts of different things. Do we work with FEMA, or do you work with FEMA closely when there's a natural disaster?
You know, Martha, that's kind of out of my area of expertise. I'm sure that there's a lot of federal coordination between public health and domestic security agencies and emergency response agencies. I'm sure that's going on, but as far as specifics and programmatic issues of ensuring that people receive vaccination, I can't really answer that question. I mean, this paper specifically addressed the issue of if a vaccine is stored outside of the recommended temperature, is there any health risk to the individual for getting that vaccine? And, you know, provided there hasn't been a breach in sterility, there doesn't appear that there would be any health risk beyond what you would normally expect.
So whenever I think of change of temperature, I always think of a natural disaster. You know, what would make you, no electricity, so you have no heat, you have no AC. So I always think, so vaccines, this paper then would indicate that vaccines are safe if they're sitting at room temperature in Puerto Rico, or if they're, that's interesting. That's an interesting study to me.
Well, there won't be any. We don't think that there would be any safety issues beyond what you would normally expect with a vaccine had it been stored incorrectly. That's not to say there's not risk, because if potency is impacted, you'd be administering a vaccine which might not be providing an acceptable level, an appropriate level of protection from the diseases.
And every meeting, I can't leave a commission meeting without asking the question, how's our Zika vaccine coming? Do you have any statistics on that?
I'll have to defer to NIH on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're still, okay.
Tom, this is Cody, and I just wanted to thank you and others in the Immunization Safety Office, because those papers that you have contributed to are very, very helpful in reassuring us of the safety of vaccines. So thanks for all that work.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Really, that's I'll extend that to, you know, the folks that work with the data in our office on a day-by-day basis and do the studies and do the analysis and write the papers are the ones who do the bulk of the work here. So really, the thanks goes to them. But I appreciate it.
You're too modest.
All right, any final questions for Tom? I need to point out that Tina needed to get off the call for just a little bit. She'll join us momentarily, and that Alexandra is on the call and is listening. She's just not able to speak. She hasn't had any questions so far. We've been going back and forth. I told her that I'd be happy to ask a question on her behalf. So she said that her plan was during lunch to disconnect completely and then try to reconnect. While we have heard from Tom, we still have presentations from Barbara and Valerie and Karen. It is lunchtime at this point, so I just need to know from the commissioners what you would like to do. Shall we break for a little bit, 30 minutes? Do you need a full hour? I'm just throwing it out there for the commissioners. What works best, and what would you recommend that we do at this point?
This is Cody. I think 30-minute break is okay.
Ms. Dino, that sounds good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
good.
we're fine. So call back at 12:35.
Right. Yes. Let's do that, and then at that time, we'll hear from our final 3 presenters, and then we'll have public comments, and then we'll have a discussion on new business and future agenda items. So
Okay.
I look forward to talking to everybody in about 30 minutes.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Tom?
Hello.
This is John Howie. I'm back on as well.
Hi, John.
Valerie,
Thank you.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi.
Hello?
Hi, Martha.
Oh, hi, I'm already on. Nobody came on to tell me I was on.
You're always on.
Always. No, not always. Not always. I wake up for you. But not always.
Hi, Beth. It's Annie.
Hey, Annie.
Hi, Annie.
Everybody else. Hi, Martha, Alexandra, John, Valerie. I think I got everybody.
Yep. Yay. Well, I'm very close to you, Anna. I'm in Virginia. I'm not far from you.
In Virginia?
Yeah. I had to come back for other stuff and doctors and all that kind of crap. So I could have come over and had our meeting together. I could have been with you. But
Kathleen, are you on the call?
Yeah, Kathleen's here.
And Cody, are you on the call? Dino, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. And Tina, are you on the call?
So Annie, do you want to wait another minute or two to see if Cody's able to join us?
I think that's fine, yeah.
Because I'm not sure when Tina was going to be able to rejoin, but But I'll bet Cody is going to be here soon.
Okay, yeah, we can wait a minute.
Anybody want to buy a house on St. John? We're selling ours. We're moving back, Annie.
Wow.
Well, it's in perfect shape. It didn't get hurt by the hurricane. It's all clean. It's beautiful. It's ready. But between, we don't have the extensive, sophisticated medical infrastructure that we need for Jeffrey. And so we're just going to get out of there and come home and be safer.
Annie, who's planning on going next? Will it be Valerie or is Barbara available yet?
She hasn't emailed me to let me know. Barbara, are you on the phone? So I would say we could probably just go ahead and start with Valerie and then do Karen, and then we can, hopefully Barbara will be back by then.
Okay.
This is Cody.
Cody, hello.
Hi.
One final call for Tina. Is Tina on the call? We certainly have enough for a quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. Will the operator lead us in?
Yes, ma'am, you're now live.
Thank you very much. Welcome back to all of the commissioners and ex officio members. I wanted to point out that we do have Alexandra's line working now, so she can speak with us. We're so happy about that. Sorry about that, Alexandra.
It was my fault.
We are going to make a slight change on the agenda in that we're going to have our next update from Valerie Marshall. Valerie, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay. Good afternoon. I am Commander Valerie Marshall, and I will provide a very brief update on vaccine-related activities from the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research within the Food and Drug Administration. In January 2018, the FDA approved a change to an existing license for quadrivalent to extend the age range to include children 6 to 35 months of age. The vaccine was previously indicated for persons 3 years of age and older. In January 2018, the FDA approved a supplement to the biologics license application for influenza vaccine Blue Zone to include the 2018 Southern Hemisphere formulation. On March 1st, 2018, the Food and Drug Administration's Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee chose influenza vaccine strains for the 2018-2019 season in the Northern Hemisphere, which begins in the fall of 2018. These recommendations are based on worldwide surveillance data. I submitted my slides prior to the outcome of this meeting, so I will briefly update you on the strains that will be included. The strains that will be included in the 2018-2019 trivalent vaccine include Influenza A Michigan 45-2015, which is an H1N1 pandemic 09-like virus. The next strain is Influenza A Singapore, which which is an H3N2-like virus. This replaces the A Hong Kong H3N2 from last year's strain. The third strain will be influenza B Colorado 06-2017-like virus, which replaces the B Brisbane from last year's strain. The last strain that will be included in quadrivalent formulations, and that is influenza B Phuket 3073. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. Are there any questions for the Commander?
I think she gets an award for the shortest report ever. Cool.
Thank you.
Valerie, this is Beth. Martha was asking earlier about where the Zika virus vaccine is in the process. Would that be an appropriate question to ask you?
Actually, Takeda released a statement saying that in January 2018, FDA granted them fast-track designation for their Zika vaccine candidate. So that information is in the public realm. So there is a vaccine in development for Zika.
And this is Karen Bach from the National Vaccine Program Office. I have an update. I have a slide with the progress of all the Zika candidates too.
Oh, perfect.
Excellent. Wow.
Do any of the commissioners have a follow-up question for the Commander? All right. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Karen. Sounds like you're already on the line. While you're getting your presentation pulled up, I just wanted to do a quick check to see if Tina is on the line yet. Okay. Okay, Karen, we're ready.
Hi, good afternoon. Will I be advancing the slides or Annie is advancing the slides? I'm a little bit confused.
Either way, I made you a presenter, so you can do it yourself if you want to control the flow, or I can just follow along.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Well, our update this time is only about the meeting that we held for the National Vaccine Advisory Committee. This is the first meeting in a while. A meeting has been canceled last year because we didn't have an Assistant Secretary for Health, and we decided to hold a meeting in February. And thankfully, we just announced that there has been a political appointee for the ASH position, so that is all good news. So the first thing we discussed, the NVAC, the National Vaccine Advisory Committee, had a lot to do with the human papillomavirus vaccine recommendations and how to increase the uptake of the vaccine. And we had an update on that issue. We also had an update on the progress of the Presidential Advisory Committee on HPV vaccination. And the Vaccine Advisory Committee decided to create a working group. The ASH asked NVAC to establish a working group that will produce a brief report by June 2018 on recommendations to strengthen effectiveness of national, state, and local efforts to improve HPV vaccination coverage rates. We're still lacking on our coverage rates overall in several nationally and statewide, so we are launching this working group to advise us on how to improve the coverage rates in general. So that's something we'll hear by the end of the year. The second session had to do with vaccine innovation updates. I don't know if you remember, but the 21st Century Cures Act directed MVPO to write a report on vaccine innovation. Congress was concerned about the fewer vaccine developers and the fact that there are a lot of undeveloped vaccines that will benefit the public health if they were to be developed. So they wanted a report on the state of vaccine innovation business in the United States. We were ready to present that, but it hadn't been cleared by the new secretary by then, so we could not present the report itself. Will be out soon. But we had two other presentations. One was incentivizing the development of vaccines. And the second one, like I said, was the Zika vaccine development update from BARDA, from Dr. Robert Johnson from BARDA. And that's your next slide. And you can see in this slide there are many, many candidates, Zika vaccine candidates. They are in different stages of development, from research to phase 2. At this point, I'm not sure if this is totally updated with the Takeda update that Valerie just mentioned, but at this point, a DNA-based vaccine sponsored by the National Institute of Health is the most advanced, is in phase 2B, and it's being tested in several countries around the world, including in a clinical trial. But you can go back and look at all this in detail. It's quite a complex slide. So we also had, during the vaccine innovation session, we had an update on influenza vaccine development, and especially because there's been a lot of interest in universal influenza vaccine, and what's the state of development for a vaccine that will not have to be used every year, or it will provide longer immunity. And we also had an update on the vaccines being developed from BARDA, and they call them the next generation influenza vaccine candidates. One of the next generation will be universal vaccines. And you can see it's also a very complex slide, but there are thankfully many, many candidates that are already in phase 2, trying different approaches that would improve on the influenza vaccine that we have licensed right now. The last session that we had that was very interesting as well was an update on vaccine adjuvants. Valerie mentioned, and FDA had approved a couple of new class of adjuvants last year that were licensed with new vaccines. So this was a very timely session, and as you see in this slide, we only had mostly alum salts on vaccines that are licensed in the U.S., except for one HPV vaccine that was Cervarix. And in 2017, there were 3 new adjuvants that were licensed in vaccines, so there's a lot of new activity in that area, and the committee wanted to know more about the adjuvants that had been licensed, SA01, MS59, and CPG. So we heard from MVAC and also from other adjuvant scientists about this. And then the last session that I'm going to tell you about is we talked about disparities in adult immunization. Many of you already know that pediatric immunization is pretty stable. Most of the immunizations that kids get are, they have a good coverage, but adult immunizations are a challenge, and we're trying to work on improving adult immunization coverage rates. So there was a session to discuss the disparities in adult immunization and how can we improve coverage rates nationally. And like I said, we had 2 new HHS announcements. We have a new Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, and we have also a new Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Brett Girard. So those are our news for now, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
This is Martha. I have some Zika questions for you. Did we ever are we doing any preclinical or any activities in Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Guam, or any other of the U.S. territories?
Yes. Actually, this vaccine, the one that is sponsored by NIH, and probably Barbara can tell you more about it, it's being tested in Puerto Rico. One of the sites is Puerto Rico, yeah.
And then has that been destroyed from the hurricane? I mean, there's not much going on in Puerto Rico. Are we still able to continue the research and the activities even after Hurricane Irma and Maria?
Yeah, as far as I know, they are. I'm not really the person to ask that, but as far as I know, the trial is still ongoing, and they're still being able to conduct the trial there.
I don't know how. There's no hospital. I mean, where are they doing this? What's the infrastructure?
Like I
literally,
said,
what building? What building?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not the person to ask the details on this. This was just an update from BARDA, and I'm regurgitating what Barbara said. So, we'll have to find out from someone that is involved with the trial. I can find that out for you if you want.
Yes,
more
that would be
details on
helpful.
the
Because people have been asking people are asking because there are no hospitals in the Virgin Islands. We only have clinics left. We don't have hospitals, and people are kind of wondering where can they participate. People are anxious, and with 350,000 people without electricity in Puerto Rico and no hospitalization, I was kind of wondering how the preclinical trials were how we were even physically doing them.
Okay, I can find out. It's NIH sponsored, so Barbara might want to also answer that question, but I can definitely ask for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Are there any other questions for Karen? Okay. Thank you, Karen.
No problem. Thanks.
Just checking to see if Barbara is available and on the line. Okay, Annie, then my question, I guess, would be, would it be okay to go to public comment given that we have not yet heard from Barbara, or is it better for us to continue talking about new business?
Okay. Hey, Beth, it's Annie. I think just in case anyone has any comments that they want to make regarding the NIH update, maybe we should do future agenda items and new business first.
Okay.
Wait for Barbara to hop back on, and then, she can give her update, and then we'll take public comment.
Okay. Sounds great. And just checking to see if Tina has joined us yet. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the future agenda items and new business. We were talking at the very beginning of the meeting this morning about action items and things that we as a commission would like to focus on. I've made a couple of notes here as we've been going on. One thing that we'll need to follow up on in the next meeting is the December meeting minutes. And then I also had written down that there is a potential issue with backlog, a bottleneck, if you will. And it would be helpful to have an increase in HRSA reviewers just to give them more resources. I also had written down a comment, Martha, that you had brought up with the perceived treatment of petitioners. And then I think we also would love to hear an update, if there is one, Annie, on the vacant position that is on the commission right now. Can we start with that one first? Are you able to provide an update, Annie, on the vacant position for the parent?
Yeah, this is Narayan. I can provide an update. We've reached out to our colleagues at the Department of Justice to identify parents who would be eligible to serve, and also, and I reached out to John Howie as well to sort of get feedback from the petitioners bar if they had any candidates as well. So that's sort of where we're at, and we're in the process of gathering names, and then hopefully we can, those names will have to be put packages together as you all went through that process, and that can take a bit of time, but hopefully we'll be able to get somebody to fill that vacant slot.
Yeah, that
This is Martha. Have we been able to ascertain how we can get somebody with a vaccine injury on the commission? Has that been resolved? I mean, does the two parent seats, does it have to be a parent, or how can we proceed with that? I think it's really vital if we're going to talk about vaccine injuries we need to have somebody with a vaccine injury on the commission?
Yeah, thanks for that question and comment. The way it is now, we are required to have 2 parents. So, we couldn't replace one of those slots with someone who's vaccine injured. We would need a parent of a vaccine injured child. Theoretically, we do have members of the public, so one member of the public, and so someone who is vaccine injured could apply for that slot.
Okay. And the way we would go about doing that would be through John and the vaccine. The same way we're getting parents would be the same system to get somebody who has a vaccine injury. Am I correct?
That's a good question. There's a couple of ways they could do it. Certainly, if they have a claim, they could reach out to the petitioner's attorney. Another way is all this information is on the website, and we actually did post a frequently asked questions about serving on the ACCV, and that's on the website as well. So those are resources that say how to apply and what openings there are, and sort of give background on the ACCV. So those 2 routes I would suggest for people that have an interest.
Well, what I'm saying is people don't even know we exist. It's like having a store where you expect people to come in and shop, but you don't do any advertising. I mean, a lot of people don't even know we exist. And so my thought was we could be proactive in going out and looking for people and say, I bet you didn't even know this existed. Would you like to serve on it? And that's a more proactive way of doing it than rather waiting for people to come to serve. I didn't know you existed, and look how long I was in the program.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we really appreciate John Howie's helping us in terms of getting the word out to the community of attorneys. And again, hopefully directing people to the website. We've posted kind of under our website as prominently as we could think of as kind of a job opportunities to serve. So hopefully that'll give us some visibility as well.
And then my second question, as far as parents go, and I guess I really truly don't know this, if a parent had served already and hasn't been on the commission for 9, 10 years or whatever, are they allowed to come back on?
Yeah, I believe they could. I don't believe that that would hold them back.
Okay, so parents are allowed to come back if they've been.
Yeah, we can double check. Let me confirm on that, but to my knowledge, they could. Let me double check on, and we can get back to you. That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to have the same people over and over again, but on the other hand, if somebody's been out of the loop for 6, 7, 8 years, they might have the energy to do it again. Yeah, and we have been proactive in the sense we did reach out to certain parents through the petitioner's attorneys, and as you know, some of the parents, it takes a lot of time. It can take significant amounts of time to serve on the commission, and just with their other responsibilities, they weren't able to do it. So we have been sort of trying to ask people as well and be proactive in that regard. We've had a number of people who just weren't able to do it just because of time constraints. Well, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to do. Yeah.
Dr. Nair, this is John Howie. I just have a quick question. Well, a couple of things. I would like to say we've passed along this opportunity to the entire set of lawyers that are members of the Vaccine Injured Petitioners Bar Association. We've also passed along this opportunity to another group of lawyers, but kind of who do the same thing, to the American Association for Justice. So the word is slowly getting out that, at least from our side, we're desperately needing somebody to fill this role. The question I was going to ask you is, has any parent submitted an application as of yet?
Yeah, to my knowledge, no. We haven't had anyone for this vacant slot that we have currently. Yeah, no.
Okay, thank you.
Narayan, I think this is Beth. You mentioned earlier that kind of trying to get into that process of serving on the commission was on the website, and I was just wondering, for those who may be listening and who are interested, what would be the website they would go to?
hold on just a second. We'll pull it up. Yeah, we'll pull it up so people can see. So this will be on the... Yeah, so the slide here, this, and I won't read the whole thing, but that link there leads to the ACCV website.
Not everybody, some people are on the phone. Could
yeah,
you
so...
read it out loud?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you Google... Well, there's actually another ACCV that comes up first. So if you Google Advisory Committee of Childhood Vaccines, or you can Google ACCV. I think actually there's another ACCV unrelated to vaccines that comes, at least when I Google that, it comes up first. But the full website is www.hrsa.gov advisory committees /childhood vaccines /index.html. That's the full website, but again, you can Google advisory. I would recommend doing advisory committees of childhood vaccines, and then we'll come up, and then there you can see actually when the upcoming meetings are, how to participate in a meeting. You can see previous minutes from previous meetings, and then there's something that says job opportunity. In fact, I think the job opportunities flashes up right when you click on that website, and you can click on job opportunities to outline, who can serve, what their qualifications are to serve, and how you go about applying.
Thank you. And to clarify, the parent, it can't be somebody who has the opinion that their child has been injured. It has to be a person who has gone through the process of the court. Am I correct?
Yeah, it has to be a decision of the court. That's correct.
And could it have been a bad decision, like the parent, the petitioner did not win? Can they still serve on the commission?
That would not meet the qualifications for the parent member.
Okay. It would have to be a person who had won. Okay.
A court decision.
Yeah, okay. So it couldn't be somebody who did settlement or a proffer?
No. It could be a proffer, but not a negotiated settlement.
Okay. Okay, so somebody who settled, it couldn't be, that person would not qualify to serve.
To serve as the parent in the parent's lot. That's correct.
Okay. Well, my observation is that since we're advocating settlements so that we can get these cases done quicker, we're kind of automatically diminishing the pool of people who qualify to serve because we're mixing our message there. You can only serve if there was a definitive decision, but we're encouraging settlements. We're mixing our message there. If anyone thought that they were doing the correct thing by doing settlement and thought that that was a good thing, then they wouldn't be able to serve.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if we're encouraging settlement. I think settlement is a result of the current direction of the program and
well, that
it's a frequent occurrence, but I don't know necessarily if we're encouraging it. But yeah, I think that you're correct in the sense that, yeah, people who get a negotiated settlement wouldn't be eligible to serve on as the parent member on this commission.
That's wrong. That would be wrong because somebody who was able to work with the federal government and do the settlement and everyone was happy with the settlement on both sides, I don't see why that person shouldn't be able to serve as well. They went through the system, and they might even have a different, well, they definitely have a different memory of the system than I did. So I think that's wrong. That just, you know, if you look at the number of settlements that we've been having, you're really diminishing who is eligible.
No, Ryan, this is Beth. So I'm looking actually at the charter description, and I'm assuming that's where the rules come from, is from the charter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it looks like the charter was last updated on July 20th of 2016. So I think we might be talking, Martha, about making a change to the charter itself.
Yeah, the charter, though, is a reflection of language that's in the statute. So it would be changing the statute.
Okay. which is beyond what we can do.
Right.
Okay. I wanted to ask, did any of the other commissioners, did you pick up on something that we need to be working on outside our regular meetings from the presentations we've received so far?
This is Alexandra. I was hoping that we could invite Catherine Reeves to give further clarification on this discussion that they had, you all had earlier this morning about the HPV, Tdap, and the Hodgkin's lymphoma and how they came to a settlement. I think that the public would really appreciate understanding that, because as it stands now, members of the public might well think that they could bring a petition claiming that HPV caused cancer. And just a clarification would really be helpful, I think.
So that definitely would be something that Catherine would need time to prepare for, but I think it would be well within our purview to request at the June meeting that Catherine include some of that information. I know they wouldn't be able to give all the information, but just to address the concern that you're bringing up right now, Alexandra, that others might have as well.
Right. And the other thing I was thinking would be helpful is if we ask our presenters to discuss future research. That also might be helpful to the public. Someone might be planning on doing some research around pandas or any of the other conditions that were in the petitions that we talked about at the last meeting, to give someone further information about the possibility of additional research.
And who would be best poised to do that, Narayan?
I'll have to think about that. Who would certainly, typically research, general research, typically NIH is the lead, immunization safety research, CDC. But we can, think about that and get a speaker that meets your needs. You're talking about future directions in vaccine safety research, or more so vaccine research in general?
Well, I was just thinking about Tom Shimapukuro's presentation.
Okay.
If you could just add one more slide about what you're thinking about doing in the future.
Okay.
And also NIH. They could always include a slide about future research.
This is Tom. I think that would be relatively easy to incorporate into my agency update, into the CDC agency update.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is Martha again, and as a parent, that feeling of being on an island where nobody cares that you're there. If people knew that there were in the pipeline, if we were going to have studies on Panda, which exists, it's there. Something happens, whether or not it's Panda or something else, I don't know. But obviously things are happening, and I think parents feel that they're not being listened to, and there's not enough research being done on all these things that are going on. So I think that's a good idea.
That's a great recommendation, Alexandra.
Yeah. Once again, she's the smart one in the room.
All right. Anything else that any of the commissioners would like to bring forward for future agenda items?
This is John Howie. I just had a couple of things. Martha actually raised this issue at the beginning of this conversation we're having today, which was when we get these presentations from HHS on requests to make revisions to the table, providing an opportunity to maybe the individual who's offering the petition to come in and present their side of the story so that we're getting both sides. And Martha, you can talk a lot more to that because that was your idea, but I just wanted to revisit that.
Yeah, I think that we're often making decisions in a bubble. And once again, I've said this 1,000 times. I don't live in the same world you guys live in. I live in a world, I'm in the trenches out here.
I see what is described as pandas every day. I see autism every day, and I'm, a lot of parents are getting the thought that things are being labeled, but nothing is being solved. People are labeled as autism. People are labeled as pandas because it seems to make everyone feel better to give a child a label. But there's clearly something going on, and I think it does not behoove us to ignore people. I know what people think of Bobby Kennedy and that whole vaccine safety campaign, but it behooves us to listen to people who are out there who could disagree with some of the commission members or not, but we should really be listening to more people. And as much as I appreciate, and I truly do appreciate the reports from Tom and from everyone else, I'd also like to hear from the other side more. I'd like to hear what they have to say. I've been to Bobby Kennedy's lectures. I've seen his movie, not particularly well produced, but that's okay. I'd like to hear more from other people, and we're a very dry commission. We're trying to make scientific decisions, but some of us aren't scientists, and we should listen to other sides.
So the action item, this is Beth. I'm trying to word this in an action item. So is it that, how would those people be selected? And I'm thinking about our last meeting. We did have a researcher who was in the public and who, during public comment period, had shared a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation with the group. That's the sort of thing that you're referring to.
And you hit the nail on the head. Who gets to provide? Who's invited, or is it just part of public comment and anybody can come on in and during public comment, or that's sort of unwieldy. We might have a 4-hour public comment. Mm-hmm. So you hit the nail on the head. How do we do that?
Well, this is John Howie again. Is there anything that would prevent us from letting the individual who submitted the petition know ahead of time their petition is going to be submitted, and if they would like to speak, then give them the opportunity?
We did do that the last meeting, and also in the Federal Register that comes out before the meetings, it does say if you have a presentation to give, you can submit that information, and then that can be incorporated into the public comment. And as you recall, we had a public comment period after each presentation for each petition. So we did contact the individuals that submitted the petition and let them know.
I don't read the Federal Register on a regular basis, so I was more thinking.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that. I was going to say
it's on the website as well, where we posted on the website that information. And I don't read it on a regular basis either, because sometimes it's kind of a snoozer. But it is important information, and so we do post that on the website.
But what about just simply reaching out to the individual that submitted it and with a letter or a phone call to tell them, with sufficient time before the meeting to allow them to make arrangements to appear if they would like, that their petition is going to be submitted on this date, and if they want to come talk about it, please do.
I think there's something else, this is Alexandra, there's something else that we could do as commissioners, and that is explain our vote. Give the 4 points that were important, that were significant to us. I was willing to even give them the slide number to help them understand how I came up with my no vote. We didn't have much time. We were really busy the last meeting because we had those 6 petitions. But if we could just say yes or no for the following reasons, A, B, C, or D, I think it would really be helpful to the public.
I agree. Ms. Martha?
And also, Alexandra again, I think it would be really helpful to explain that just because it's not on the table, we did not vote to have it on the table, does not preclude them from bringing their claim before the commission. It can happen.
It can. This is Beth, and I believe that was mentioned at the conclusion of each presentation. That
it was, but it went by very quickly, and I just think that the public needs to hear this repeatedly.
Okay.
To help them understand.
If I could, I think these are great topics. I've heard some discussion about speakers, about the process of discussing these petitions. If I could make a suggestion, that I think that would be very amenable to kind of having a work group to go through and flesh that out, some of those things, or maybe a couple of work groups, and then report back at a future meeting.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea, Narayan. And also, I mean, for those of you who are newer on the commission, I know Alexandra and Martha and I were all part of smaller work groups. We had one work group that was formed to work on recommendations regarding the process. Anything in the process of filing a claim and anything from that point forward. And then there was also another work group that was formed to talk about pregnancy and vaccination, I think it was. That one I did not serve on. Is my memory serving me correctly?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a few of those work groups, and those were some.
So we have done this before. The work group that is assembled meets outside of a regular commission meeting and then does a work group report during the commission meeting, and it's at that point that they could present what they have come up with and ask for an actionable item. I mean, it sounds like we're back into needing to go through process again. John, I'm hearing that from you and Martha. Is that right? Do we want to reform a work group on the process, or is there another more applicable name?
Well, it's Martha again. One of the frustrating things about the work groups that we had was that we successfully sent the Secretary of Health and Human Services our recommendations, and the silence, the lack of response was remarkable. And sometimes I'm beginning to think, okay, I'm going to be honest, okay? Please don't take this the wrong way. What's the point? Nobody's listening to us. Mm-hmm. We don't have a Secretary of Health and Human Services who responds to us, and it's been not just this administration, but the past administration. And at some point, where the very person we're supposed to be reporting, or the very person we're supposed to be sending our recommendations to, we're not getting any feedback, I think. I mean, I don't see any feedback. Annie, and I mean, I'm very frustrated by the fact that we're doing this and nobody really seems to pay attention.
So I believe the problem that we ran into last time, and this is just from, this is Beth, from my own personal view, is that the secretary who was serving at the time that we submitted our recommendations was kind of at the end of their term, and then we had an election process, and then we had a new president, and then we were waiting for a new secretary. But when we did the work group recommendations the last time, I feel like we were a little late in the term.
Right.
But we have an opportunity right now to make recommendations very early in this presidential term and in the term of the current secretary. So
could it be, just to make things the efficiency level, could it be that we just repeat our recommendations from the last 2 to 3 years?
I think it would be really easy to update it.
Yes, and just resubmit it, because frankly, we still want more special masters. We still want more staff for, all of our recommendations are the same.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that anyone is going to disagree with what we've already asked for. Update it and submit it as soon as possible.
Agreed. And I think, I know for sure that we did make a recommendation on special masters, and I believe we did for help for the DOJ.
Yes.
I don't remember including anything with HRSA and reviewers to try to help relieve some of that backlog, but it could be easily added and then switched over to the new secretary.
I think that would get us moving quicker.
Is there a different work group that would need to be formed, or should we just focus on process at this point?
I love the idea of the process. This is Alexandra. And I love the idea of revisiting our previous recommendations.
And some of the recommendations that were discussed, and it really depends on the nature of the recommendations, or the topics, I should say. It need not be a recommendation that goes directly to the secretary. And for instance, if there's discussion about petitions and how the commission wants those presented and how they want that flow of that discussion, it's possible that may not rise to the level of the secretary, since that's the internal process of the ACCV. And I know one of the previous recommendations, I believe, by the maternal immunization one, was to add maternal immunizations to the vaccine injury table, and that would have required a change in the statute, and that did occur. So that was one recommendation that was pushed forward that did actually occur.
Narayan, this is Karen Bach. Can I say a comment representing HHS?
Sure.
Okay. I think it's great, and that we go through this frustration cycle a little bit with the National Vaccine Advisory Committee as well. I just want to remind, and that's what we keep in mind as well in our advisory committee, that the committee's ultimate role is to advise and not to require an answer from the secretary. So you advise the secretary, we advise the assistant secretary of health, and all we can do is track those recommendations to see if any activity has happened around the recommendation, like Narayan mentioned the maternal immunization change in the statute. But we need to not think as not being heard or because something doesn't happen. The primary role of the advisory committee is to advise on a certain subject. That's all.
Yes. Thank you, Karen.
And then, Beth, this is Tamara. I wanted to say, too, that the recommendations that the advisory committee makes are actually used at times by other sources to show that the ACCV supports a particular issue. So it may not necessarily be that it's a response from the secretary. It could be, the media or someone else cites that the ACCV supported a particular issue, which is actually shows that there has been a thought process and that there is some backing and support for a particular issue.
Perfect. Thank you. So from what I'm hearing, we're in favor of putting together a work group to look at process. I need to, Tamara and Annie and Narayan, I might need a little bit of guidance on the process for creating a work group. And I'm trying to remember the process last time when we went through it. It seems like we had a leader of the group that was appointed, and then there was a call-in if you were a member of the commission that was interested in serving on that particular work group. Is that correct?
So Beth, this is Tamara again. So how it generally works is we just pretty much kind of send out a request to see who's interested in participating on the work group, put together a meeting, and then the group decides who may want to lead the group, and so that's sort of the process.
Okay, awesome. All right, then let's plan on coming up with a call time, and it would be, let's see, it's March 8th right now. It would be nice if we could at least get the ball rolling in the next week. I'm assuming it would take a couple of weeks to try to get several people all on the same page, but we want to have plenty of time to have a letter written and to bring it forward to the full commission by the June meeting.
Sure.
Do any of the commissioners have questions about that? So what will happen is that you'll receive an email, and they usually do what's it called, where you can like fill out the times and dates that you're available.
It's a doodle poll.
Yes, a doodle poll, yes! I'm looking for a specific scientific name, doodle, that's it. So commissioners, if you'll look for that, hopefully in the next week, so we can get some times nailed down. And if you're interested in serving in that capacity, that would be fantastic. It is nice to have someone who leads the work group and also a secretary who can help take minutes at those meetings that are going on. And Tamara, you would have a copy of the last letter that was sent to the old secretary from the process work group, yes?
Yes, yes, we have them, and they're all on the website too, but yes, we have all of them.
So that would be great. Is that something that would be helpful for people to look at before you agree to hop on the call for the work group, or do we just get a work group meeting set and then you can go through the document?
Well, if the documents are on the website, it's pretty easy for somebody just to, open up the website and look at them.
Okay. All right. So I think our next item is to just try to get the work group meeting scheduled as soon as we can.
Okay.
Are there, is there any opposition to forming a work group, or are we unanimous in supporting a work group to look at process again and to draft a letter?
Beth, this is Dino. I'm in support of that, but when you say draft a letter, that part, which I know you mentioned a moment ago, what do you mean by that again, please?
So what happens, and Tamara, you hop in here if I say this incorrectly, but what the work group does is they put together a first draft of what their recommendations are. They do the research. They have all of the citations. And then the office, I know, Tamara, you helped us with the letter last time and helped us even find sources that would be supportive. And then that letter is brought forth to the commission in its entirety, so in our June meeting, and the leader presents it to the commission, and the commission needs to have a vote on whether or not they support the work group letter so that it can be sent forward from there.
Sent forward to the secretary?
Yes.
Okay. So that might not, if it's purely a process-oriented work group, then if that's not something the secretary needs to approve, then that might be a situation where the work product of the work group won't be a letter. Do I have that right?
It could be.
Okay.
So Beth, this is Tamara, and I just wanted to say that regarding the work group and sort of final products of the ACCV, we generally, as staff and support staff, have, for the most part, helped to draft those letters, and there have been situations when members have done it, but the majority of the time it's staff that helps to draft those recommendations. And John, you're right that I guess it depends on what the recommendations of the ACCV are. It could be simply a document that lists a bunch of recommendations or some standard operating procedures, or it could be something different than a recommendation.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
But Tamara, I mean, you were able to provide kind of the, you could advise us on
Yes.
who the best person was to address the recommendation to.
Exactly right. Yeah. So we're there to support you all, and however we can help you to get the additional information or resources that you need, that the committee needs to, or the work group needs to make decisions. So yes, we're there to support the work group.
All right. Okay, so just in review then, there were a couple, for as far as future agenda, we're going to ask Catherine Reeves about a little more information about the HPV vaccine and the case on Hodgkin's lymphoma, the alleged.
Just one point of clarification, and I don't want to speak for Catherine. She stepped out. But, there are privacy provisions that need to be considered, and so it would be difficult, I think, for her to give details about a particular case. I think what she may be able to do, and again, I don't want to speak for her, is provide some general information about how the special masters assess causality and what they use to make a determination, because I think that does sort of tie into the negotiated settlements and some of the claims and the things that you see in terms of how they end up being settled.
Sure, but I think you could provide would be great.
And this is Martha. I think any explanation of how a person either wins or loses is vital to keeping the process, keeping the public safe. I mean, people aren't going to have faith in the court system, in this vaccine court system, if they don't know, they don't understand what decision making, how it happens. So I didn't know. I mean, I had to have it explained to me by Renee Gentry how it all would work. But in our case, my husband and I completely abdicated everything to Renee and Cliff and paid no attention to anything because it was too upsetting. We didn't know if we were going to win or lose. We didn't care. We didn't pay any attention. We didn't make any decisions based on it. We provided what we needed to provide as far as information and paying for Xeroxing or whatever. But for the most part, in all those years we were involved with the process, my husband and I ignored it because it was too upsetting. And so that's something that we might want to realize, that a lot of people don't understand how it works, the different steps that it takes, and then how the decision is made. So I think that's a good idea. And then, John, is there a way that, I don't want to force the issue, but is there a way that we could go back and the same kind of communication we have with the lawyers regarding getting a parent rep, is there any way to let people know that eventually there'll be another position available for somebody? I mean, eventually the public, that one, I always think of it as at large. I'm sorry, it's so political. There could be an opening on the commission for somebody who has a vaccine injury. It'd be nice if we could maybe let that information out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to circulate that through the same channels that we circulated the empty parent position.
Okay. I mean, in my ideal commission world, if I was writing everything and doing everything, if I was the commission czar, I would force us to I would make it a regular seat at the commission. I would change it so that we have to have somebody with a vaccine injury on it. But since we can't do that easily, but the other way, the quick way.
I do like the idea of a commission czar.
Wouldn't it be cool? I see, I'm 61 now, and so I'm sort of in charge of a lot of stuff in my life. So I just want to be in charge of everything. It just would be so much more efficient. Just be efficient. It would be fun.
I think it's been productive, and I think we have several things coming up on the agenda, and then also with the planned work group. That this is excellent. Before we move to Barbara's presentation, is there anything else from any of the commissioners on future agenda items or new business?
It's Martha again. I have a question. Always have it quarterly. When do we get to meet in person again? And is our budget such that we're only going to get to do it once a year? Or Annie knows how I feel about this. I think we're much more productive together in the same room.
but I don't know if we've given up on that.
So Martha, this is Tamara. And so generally the budget has allowed us to meet in person twice a year. So, and then the other thing that's sort of determined whether or not we meet in person is the agenda, and whether or not, you know, is it worth people's time to have it to come and travel for an in-person meeting. So those are the factors. So it could be the June meeting, it could be in person, and that's something that, you know, we would discuss with Beth.
Okay.
Once we have, you know, agenda items and, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Are we okay to move on to Barbara? Barbara, are you on the line and ready?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Excellent. I'm so sorry about messing with your schedule earlier today.
Oh, it's perfectly fine. It all worked out.
Well, and it's been very interesting hearing where you guys are thinking about going in the near future. So I look forward to hearing more from you guys about that as we go on. So I just have a brief update for you on what's going on at the National Institutes of Health. I did also want to mention you guys had talked about some scientific areas where you're curious to know what's going on. I will talk to my colleagues that are doing some of the autism and pandas research to see if maybe there would be an opportunity to provide a little bit more information about what's going on. It may not be specific to vaccines, but if it's of interest in terms of what we do know and where we might be going, I'd be happy to try to make some of those connections.
Thank you, Barbara.
Sure. So do I have control or do you, Annie?
You can advance the slides, Barbara.
Yeah, I think operator limitations might be the issue.
I can do it then.
Thank you. So yeah, if you could go to the next slide. This is just to remind me to tell you, as you probably heard in one of your other presentations about considering all that we went through with seasonal influenza vaccines these years. It's just a constant reminder that we do have a vaccine for flu, but that we could be much better, and that we are always worried about seasonal flu every year when it comes around, but we're also worried about when the virus mutates even more and we have a pandemic, and that causes a lot of mortality and morbidity. And so one of the things that NIH is really trying to do is to try to find a way to create a more broadly protective universal flu vaccine. So next slide, please. So if you're interested in reading a little bit more about that, Dr. Fauci, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Director, wrote an article in Scientific American recently, and I can send a PDF if that would be helpful. Just talking about what the issue is. It's the 100th anniversary of the 1918 influenza pandemic, and you know, there's still a lot we don't know, and there's still a lot of disease that we can't prevent, and so we're looking to do that. So in the next slide, I just wanted to highlight for you that NIAID recently came out with a universal influenza vaccine strategic plan, and it outlines several key research areas that we want to move into. So we're really trying to push this effort to better understand influenza, to better characterize the disease that's out there, and to support a more rational design of influenza vaccines. And again, keeping in mind that the next vaccine we see may be better, but there are going to be stages to get to sort of the ideal of having a flu vaccine that covers us against any flu that's circulating and that we do not have to take annually. So it's a long-term endeavor for sure. And I don't know if you're aware, perhaps one of the other speakers mentioned it, but today there's actually a hearing on the Hill of the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations talking about U.S. public health preparedness for and response to seasonal influenza. So I'm sure there will be information about that in the public domain if you're interested. So CDC, FDA, NIH, and BARDA were all presenting today. And so I look forward to giving you guys updates as we go forward with our universal influenza strategic plan. Next slide, please. And we can also talk about better preparing against infectious diseases more broadly than just for influenza. Barney Graham, who works at NIAID, he's an intramural investigator, and Nancy Sullivan, who is very involved in the Ebola vaccine development efforts, wrote this paper recently in Nature Immunology, and I wanted to highlight it because it's speaking to where the research is going in the future, where we're really trying to think about ways to be better prepared and trying to think of platforms for vaccines that we can use to try to be faster so that when a disease causes an outbreak that we are closer to having a vaccine that we can use and that we're not waiting 5 or 10 years for a vaccine once the outbreak has already come and gone. So this paper just highlights some of the ways that we can do that. Again, it's similar to what we were talking about with flu, is better understanding the disease that's circulating through surveillance and discovery, understanding the basic research of these diseases and developing reagents and tools. But then this rational vaccine design is a way where we're really trying to think about what we know about individual vaccine platforms and how we can better use them. So again, more of a, we call it kind of a plug and play, like we could have a variety of vaccine types and then to put an antigen for a specific pathogen into that vaccine platform and to try to create a vaccine that's able to be used more quickly. So that's kind of the dream, that's the long-term goal, and again, I think Ebola taught us a lot. I think Zika is teaching us a lot, and so again, that's where we hope to be going in the future. Next slide. So now to kind of take you back to where we've been the last couple of years in terms of Zika, you know, it really kind of came out of nowhere. There was a huge concern, a lot of people that were very sick, and a huge effort to try to develop Zika vaccines and to better understand the disease. And a few of the things that we've been doing, we've been talking to ACCV about over the last 2 years, but just to kind of let you know, if you're interested in a lot of the research that's been going on Zika, NIAID sponsored a supplement recently in the Journal of Infectious Diseases, so it was published in December of 2017, and there are a variety of articles on all different aspects of the research that's ongoing and where we've come along. And just to highlight as well, in addition to the research that's ongoing specifically about the pathogen, one of the things that this has highlighted for us is that we really need to better understand the mosquitoes, in this case with Zika, and for other diseases, the other vectors, the other bugs that might be helping to transmit the disease, to try to use that also as a way to prevent the disease. So there are some mosquito vector articles in here as well, but that just highlights that that's somewhere where we're going to. I think futuristically, NIH really wants to get a better handle on whether a tick or a mosquito or some other bug is passing along these diseases. Is there a way we can work through that cycle and break the cycle so that the disease doesn't spread as far and as wide and doesn't cause as much disease? So I hope you'll take a look. Again, if there's anything you guys are interested in, I can send you PDFs. Next slide, please. We've talked about this before, but just to remind you that we do have a Zika DNA vaccine candidate that is in phase 2 to be testing. I don't have the recent numbers on that, but we should be providing information once that gets, once the trial is fully enrolled. So stay tuned for more on that. Next slide, please. We've also talked to you before about the Zika in infants and pregnancy study, and wanted to let you know that that trial is still ongoing. Again, it's where we're looking at the mothers and the children and following them out for over a year to try to better understand the disease, the outcome for the children, the congenital anomalies and other developmental problems that are being seen. Again, the difficulty with this, I mean, the good news is that fewer people are being showing up with Zika infection and disease, but we don't know what the long-term outcome is across the world, whether it could pop up somewhere else. So we are doing what we can to understand the disease where it still exists and where we're still dealing with the long-term implications of what happened due to the Zika infections. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but we have a very short video if you have the time. Do you think we have the time?
Yeah, I think so. If the commission agrees, I mean, from our perspective, you know, it's really up to the commission.
Yeah, this is Beth. I think that would be great. It looks like it's only 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's very short, but it just gives you a little bit of information into the Zika infants and pregnancy study. So let's see if, Annie, can you see if you can start that?
Barbara, it says the media could not be played.
Ah, wait. Oh.
We could send out maybe I could email the link.
Okay, I clicked it and it started on my computer, but that doesn't help you at all.
No.
Okay. Well, I encourage you to watch it. It's very short, but it just gives you a sense of what the trial is doing. And again, it's just important for us to understand as much as we can so that we can try to help those children and those mothers and, again, try to prevent it from happening in the future as much as possible. All right, next slide. So I also wanted to let you know about a recent research initiative that came out on the health risk and resilience after Hurricanes Irma and Maria. And I know we've had a lot of interest and a lot of people who were impacted by these hurricanes. And so basically the purpose of this initiative is to support time-sensitive research on risk and resilience factors related to the short and long-term health outcomes following these hurricanes. And so this is going to be open, I think, for a couple of years, and the earliest start date would be July of 2018. But if you know of researchers, we're sharing it with our research community, but if you know of anyone who might be interested, I would encourage them to take a look. And hopefully we'll get some really interesting applications in, and we'll be able to do some interesting research and get some answers. Multiple components of NIH are participating. So it should be very interesting, and we will report on the follow-up as we get awards for these programs. And next slide. I believe Claire Schuster from my group provided an update to you recently on the All of Us research program, but I just wanted to fill you in, and for anyone who's new, to let you know about this. Basically, this is a program that's really a historic effort to gather data from 1 million or more people that are living in the United States and to try to accelerate research and improve human health. And basically what they want to do is look at individual differences in lifestyle, environment, and biology so that the researchers can try to identify how to create ways to have precision medicine, which is our terminology for more personalized medicine, to identify what would work for you versus your neighbor versus your son or daughter. And basically what they've been doing is they put out a call to the community to ask for ideas of research topics that we should broach through this large network of people. And those applications were due on February 23rd, and there's going to be a workshop in March at NIH where they're going to discuss all of the ideas that came in. So I hope we got a large number of people coming in with ideas. And then the workshop will include a bunch of different stakeholders, research and medical communities, plus industry and technology, professional societies, and patient advocacy groups. So again, we're hoping to have balanced representation and discussion about where we can go and what kind of information we can gather from these cohorts. So I think it'll be very interesting, and we anticipate seeing lots of interesting studies and getting lots of good data in the future. And I believe that was my last slide, but I'm happy to answer questions.
This is Martha. I have several. I have questions, and then I have some information for you. Because
Great.
I just left to come back to Virginia. Just left St. Thomas on Monday, and we have, as you know, a weakened health infrastructure, and two of the clinics that we have would really like to participate because they're seeing pregnant women. They are not part of, we have a private clinic. We've got a lot of problems, as you know. Some of the questions I had to ask were, how were the trials affected by the hurricanes in the Puerto Rican area? Because nobody's paying any attention on either St. John or St. Thomas. None of the pregnant women, we're all on our own now. It's become very, very individual. If you want to report, you report. We're very concerned that the numbers are skewed because of the lack of, 350,000 people without electricity, no hospital. Where is it specifically happening on Puerto Rico? What building? What are we doing there?
So are you talking about the research initiative, or are you talking about Zika-related activities?
Zika. Because we've sort of dropped the ball on St. John and St. Thomas.
Nobody really knows what to do, and there are people who want to participate. There's several nurse practitioners, but we're kind of falling, people are moving and leaving at an alarming rate, and so we're kind of concerned with the infrastructure on the ground. Literally infrastructure, like is the building where it was happening still exist? Does it still exist? Do they have electricity? Are people being able to get there?
Yeah, and that is a huge problem, and I know that's been frustrating for everyone because, right, not having the infrastructure makes it very difficult to find the people and connect with them. Let me talk to my colleague who's been working on the Zika study, and I'll get some additional information for you.
And then the other question, in all of this reporting, people are very concerned that some of the answers are, well, let's spray for mosquitoes. You spray for mosquitoes, you kill the bees, you kill all the other, you kill everything. And so people wanted to make sure that that was not being, we can't spray the mosquitoes because it's not necessarily the mosquitoes. It could be the tick, the sand fleas, whatever.
Right. So one of the things, just to let you know, that NIH is doing is we're looking at different ways to actually create modifications in the mosquitoes. It's not about chemical spraying. It's about mating mosquitoes with other mosquitoes that will not pass on the diseases when they have their offspring. So it's about more biological methods. I mean, I would say that anything you do in the environment when you're messing with the populations of any of these insects or other things is going to change the ecology of the system overall. So we are sensitive to that, and we are looking for ways to control the disease in the population without, I mean, if you got rid of all the mosquitoes, that would have a huge economic and ecological impact. Like, you know, you don't know all of the impacts until you do something like that, and then you find out the downstream effects. And like you say with the bees, we're now finding out all the problems because of the loss of the bees. You know, back when, you know, we were doing other things, we were impacting that and not knowing it. So we are looking at a lot of different ways to do that.
These are islands where if you introduce a mongoose to kill the snakes that don't exist, then you have mongoose that are eating birds. I mean, it's all a cycle of very, very fragile ecology.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's incredibly, but if it makes you feel any better, there are no mosquitoes left. They were all swept away by the 250 mile per hour. I haven't seen a mosquito in months. I've seen sand fleas, and I've seen a scorpion. But as far as like birds and mosquitoes and ticks and all that kind of stuff, it's almost as if a huge leaf blower went through the islands and got rid of everything. There are no birds left. There's no bird. We have a banana key. We've got hummingbirds. We've got all sorts of stuff. It's almost, there are no bird sounds in the morning now. It used to be a cacophony. You couldn't sleep past 5:30. The ecology is extraordinarily fragile now. People are obviously, they're thinking of burn piles. They're thinking of the debris. It's an environmental nightmare down there. And what the hurricane didn't destroy, the recovery is beginning to destroy. So, it's, you know, I think we're not going to have this huge Zika thing because of the hurricane, because it's all gone. Everything's gone.
Right.
It's an island where there's good.
Oh, I was just going to say we still do worry about the people who have already been impacted.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot of those people have left. The diaspora of almost all the families that were on either St. Thomas or St. John were either forced to leave between Irma and Maria, or were told to leave, or to made feel unwelcome to stay. There's been the topic of, you have children on this island, what are you, an idiot? And, you know, somebody said Child Protective Services was called on her because she's a child. So the impetus to leave the island is strong. We're selling our house and leaving because of Jeffrey's medical needs. So it's a whole new ballgame down there, and you're going to have a whole new community of people. It's a young person's game now, but it's...
Excuse me, I want to interrupt for just a minute, Martha. Beth, I have to go to another conference call now, so I'm going to hang up. This is Cody.
Thank you, Cody.
Hey there. So I just want to thank you for all your hard work because it's a tough gig down there. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And
I'm
it's
sorry to
pregnancy.
hear that.
It's pregnancy and babies and it's the most emotional thing. But no, almost all the families that I knew who were young families, we had a baby boom. We probably have 140 babies on St. John now, but they all went. A lot of them went to the States and then came back. But it's what you're doing is really important work.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you. Our next comment comes from Brian Hooker. Your line is open, and please state your affiliation.
Ooh, operator, it's not time for public comment yet.
I apologize.
That's okay. Beth will let you know when she's ready.
We're almost there, though. Does anybody have any final questions for Barbara? Barbara, thank you so much for your time.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just move into public comment now that we've heard all of the different presentations. So operator,
Beth, this is Tom. Can I just make an announcement before you go into
of course
comment? Just quick. Hi, this is Tom Shimavakura from CDC. I just want to announce that following this meeting, I'm going to be rotating off as the CDC ex officio of ACCV, and Mike McNeil will be coming on. And you may know Mike. He's from our office, the Immunization Safety Office, and he's filled in several times for me when I haven't been able to attend. But before I go, I just want to thank the commission members who I know you volunteer your time and make this commission work. Thank my fellow ex officio members, but really most of all thank the HRSA staff members that run the injury compensation program and really make it kind of the gold standard and the model for injury compensation program, injury compensation around the world, in particular Narayan and Annie and Tamara and Amber and Andrea and DOJ colleagues and all the medical officers at HRSA. So I know Mike has been on this call, and like I said, he's familiar with the ACCV process and has filled in for me multiple times. So you'll be in good hands as far as CDC representation.
Well, geez, Tom, we're going to miss you.
Yeah, that's terrible news, Tom.
I'll
miss you too.
Are you staying with the CDC or are you moving on?
Yes, I'll be staying with CDC, and I'll be in the Immunization Safety Office. So I mean, this is pretty routine. I've been the ex officio for a while now, probably 7 years or so. But I mean, this is sort of routine. We rotate people on and rotate people off.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Do we get to send them a watch or anything? What do we send them?
Something. My gosh, we need to send him something.
If we were all together, Annie could go get us all candy. See? If we were all together, it'd be fun.
Right. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Mike, we look forward to working with you. Operator, let's go ahead and move into the public comment period.
Thank you. Our next question, or our question comes from Brian Hooker. Your line is open. Please state your affiliation.
Yes, this is Dr. Brian Hooker. I am with the not-for-profit called Focus for Health. I am their science advisor. And I'm a PhD biochemical engineer. I have a background in statistics and epidemiology. I've also published several peer-reviewed vaccine safety research papers using large databases, including the CDC's Vaccine Safety Data Link. I'm also the parent of a 20-year-old vaccine-injured male. And I want to emphasize we spent 13 years in the NVICP, and when our case was finally heard, which was in 2016, I believe, it was dismissed based on the statute of limitations. So we do have experience with the NVICP, and I do have a vaccine-injured child. What I specifically want to address is the TICS petition that was considered at the last ACCV meeting. It is important to note that thimerosal is still in vaccines, specifically multi-dose formulations of the influenza vaccine, which are administered to infants, toddlers, and pregnant women. The CDC response to the petition at the last meeting was scientifically inaccurate. The Thompson et al. 2007 New England Journal of Medicine study and the Burrell et al. 2012 Journal of Pediatric Psychology papers both showed a definitive and statistically significant relationship between thimerosal exposure and tics in boys. On the latter study, one of the co-authors was actually Dr. Jonathan Mink, who is a tic specialist from the University of Rochester. In addition to that, the Verstraeten study, which was published in the Journal Pediatrics in 2003, and the Andrews study, which was in Pediatrics in 2004, both showed statistically significant increases in the incidence of tics in selected population. It was selected populations only, but which alone merits additional investigation at this in this issue at a minimum. Geyer et al. 2015, this is a recent paper, it was in interdisciplinary toxicology, also showed a strong definitive relationship between thimerosal exposure and tics, using the same CDC vaccine safety data link to mine patient data as was used in the Thompson and the Burrell papers. Also, Lee et al. 2000 in the Archives of Disabilities in Children showed a case study where an herbal mercury preparation similar to thimerosal caused tics in a 5-year-old Chinese male. The tic disorder did subside after the use of the herbal preparation was stopped. There also exists a huge body of literature showing neurological harm from thimerosal exposure, such that the 2001 Institute of Medicine Immunization Safety Review Committee stated that a relationship between thimerosal and neurodevelopmental disorders is biologically plausible. It should be noted also that the 2004 IOM Immunization Safety Review Committee ruled against the relationship between thimerosal exposure and autism only, as the other such disorders, like tic disorders, were not considered. This, going back to the 2001 report, it's indeed IOM's final word on thimerosal, as thimerosal has not been considered in any subsequent IOM vaccine safety reviews. I will also remind the committee of the Burbacher et al. 2004 macaque monkey study that showed a very long half-life of elemental mercury when the monkeys were indeed exposed to thimerosal. So now, my contention is that the petition should have been either voted on or it should have been tabled for further review and further information. And I believe that if the ACCV finds itself in a gray zone on this particular injury, there needs to be such a mechanism where more research can be done by independent scientists to elucidate the link between thimerosal exposure and tics, and also to bear in mind the standard of the NVICP, which is not without a shadow of a doubt, but actually 50% in a feather. Tics are very common, and they're also a comorbidity in autism, where tic prevalence is 4 times greater in autistic subjects compared to non-autistic controls. The ACCV needs to rule on this issue outside of any bias of the omnibus autism proceedings, regardless of any strain on the NVICP Vaccine Injury Fund. Tics are a separate injury. My son has autism and tics and needs separate consideration based on the preponderance of the scientific evidence. Please understand, the strain of arguing a case in the NVICP is debilitating for families. My family did this for 13 years. Many families front tens of thousands of dollars, which they don't have, in order to show causation or search for experts willing to potentially be eviscerated and professionally marginalized by the special masters, which has happened in the case of my witnesses. These families need more to care for their injured loved ones and not to argue for just compensation. By the ACCV pressing for a definitive table injury instead of having to go to the route of proving an injury had occurred, which is becoming increasingly onerous, the public and these families are much better served by a table injury and are able to do what they're supposed to do, which is care for their wonderful special children. And I do thank you for your time. I thank you for the opportunity to speak at the ACCV.
Thank you, Dr. Hooker.
Thank you. Our next question
Can we respond to public comment or not? Beth? This is Martha.
I'm going to defer to Tamara on that. I don't think so. I think what we do is we take that information and then we can discuss it at a different time. Usually what we do is we have public comment and then we have our future agenda items and new business, and we've done it backwards this time.
So Beth, you're correct. This is the opportunity just to hear from the public, but the commission is definitely open after the public comment period to discuss, you know, if they want to discuss some of the public comments or what they want to do as a result of the public comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, operator.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Teresa Rangham. Your line is open, and please state your affiliation.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Rangham. I'm the Executive Director for the National Vaccine Information Center. As many of you know, because I comment at almost all of your meetings, our mission is to prevent vaccine injuries and deaths through public education and to upholding the informed consent ethic where vaccine laws and policies are concerned. I want to respond to a lot of the, or comment on a lot of the thoughtful discussion today, particularly discussions by Commissioner Stewart, Howie, and Toomey. NVIC has been monitoring this committee since its creation. Our co-founders were parents of children injured by the DPT vaccine, and we worked with Congress and we secured the safety provisions that exist in the law today. We've been the voice for the vaccine injured for 36 years. Our members have served on the ACCV and also work, even when not serving on committees, with work groups. So we stand at the ready to help and always have. Our comments from the standpoint of the length of this commission's work. This commission's work is extremely important. You're the only commission that, or advisory committee, that speaks for the vaccine injured and assures that injuries don't go unrecognized and that families who are torn apart by this and who also give up holidays and family dinners and many personal items because their children have met a train wreck in the form of a vaccine injury. My observation would be that there really needs to be some sort of discussion about how there is going to be outreach to Congress to get the funding to close the gaps that the IOM has repeatedly over the span of 25 years said exists, that there's simply not enough quality science or an absence of science for causality statements to be made, which hampers what goes on to the VIT, the vaccine injury table, and then creates an adversarial process where over 90% of petitions submitted to this process have to go through a litigative process, whereby parents have to essentially prove that their children have been injured. How do you do that when there's such a gap in science? It's a vicious circle. I think the commission needs to find a way to talk to Congress, even if the federal agency members cannot. In looking at recommendations made by previous iterations of this commission, I would agree that many of those recommendations appear to go unanswered and ignored. What I notice about this Federal Advisory Committee is that it doesn't issue reports. I also monitor the National Vaccine Advisory Committee, and they issue reports at lightning speed on taking away exemptions from people so that they can't opt out of vaccines. Although we're speeding ahead with innovation and fast-tracking vaccines, all the while knowing that we have serious gaps in the existing vaccines in use in terms of mechanisms of injury. There needs to be a balance on the priorities that we give to those who were injured, as well as the priorities placed on public health through mass vaccination. A one-size-fits-all, even by the standards of the IOM. They have talked about susceptibilities, individual susceptibilities, the fact that vaccine injuries can't be known a lot of times prior to vaccination. And we have the MVAC reporting on vaccine innovation and how to get more and more vaccines out there. But what are we going to do to screen people for possible injury? What about the vaccine research mandate that exists in the 1986 Act? It's not being addressed, and it's creating the caseload that is being experienced in the litigative process around the VICP because we don't have these injuries on the table. And yet there was a policy decision to add GBS for flu vaccine on the table because there was enough flow through the system to see that, I'm assuming with the evidence that was brought forward, I saw the data, this committee voted to add it, and it was added. Okay, and it was said that science would catch up. I'm speaking to the transparency that Commissioner Stewart and Commissioner Toomey have also brought up with what we know about some of these injuries that you see on your reports. MVIC has an outstanding request for more transparency in this regard, and I would love to be a part of a work group who's addressing that. There's a way to do that without exposing private information. I would love to be a part of that process and contribute. With regard to parent spots on your commission, there's nothing in the law that says a parent has to have been a successful petitioner in the VICP. And if there is, I'd like somebody to forward me the site because I look at this law a lot. 300 AA-19. Under that piece of the law, there's nothing there that says a parent of a vaccine-injured child must be a successful petitioner. MVIC submitted my name over 18 months ago. I have a vaccine-injured child. I didn't go through the process because there was no awareness that that process even existed, which takes me back to another outstanding request by our organization for this commission to revisit the recommendations made by the Alterum group and the Banyan group, who noted that there's no follow-up after an award to see how people feel about the VICP, to see if the compensation was adequate. We're seeing more compensations, but not necessarily a big rise in the money going out. Are we compensating parents enough? It's a very expensive process to support these children when they've been harmed by vaccines and sustained an injury. So there is a parent who submitted. They submitted my name. I've been monitoring this committee for a very long time, and I've never heard where in the process I am other than I'm in the process. We have another person we're going to be submitting who is a successful VICP applicant, awardee. So we will be submitting that name, but I want to go on record as saying the law doesn't say that. The law is very clear on this point, and if there's something that I'm missing, I wish someone would forward it to us. I think I would like to also renew our request that in the way of reporting out, this is what a lot of work groups do over at the National Vaccine Advisory Committee that perhaps could be looked at by this commission, which is issue informative reports that could be sent to Congress. For example, the law was a historic acknowledgement that parents were not imagining injuries and deaths. Our government acknowledged that vaccine injuries and deaths are real and that families are deserving of compensation. And this system was supposed to be a no-fault, generous, and expedient system, and it's being bogged down. You know, there needs to be a look at that, but a report by the committee on this and also upholding informed consent and the findings of the IOM in terms of individual susceptibilities and that injuries are real. It's important that we have flexible vaccine exemptions at a state level because there is a lot that's unknown. And many people are not aware of this process. Many people are not going to make it through this process because they've come to it too late. And this is what the Alterum and Banyan reports speak of, is that people are largely unaware of it. We can see a flu vaccine commercial to tell us all the vaccine adverse events possible, but nowhere in that commercial is there, by the way, if you think you've been hurt, you can contact the BICP, and there's a clock running. I'm on the work group for the CDC on revising the VIS, and these are discussions that I raise consistently, and it's very difficult to even get some of the information on there about the product insert. We need more awareness of the safety net and how it was meant to compensate families who were harmed. So I would advocate for looking at ways to report out to Congress in a supportive way that has the background, similarly to how the MVAC reports out to support your position rather than make recommendations to the Secretary over and over. Perhaps that would be something to consider. I would request that you revisit your guidelines on how you view evidence. Dr. Hooker gave a great example of why a process is needed for people bringing petitions to the VIT, to add to the VIT. The other side needs to be heard. And I'm not talking about through public comment. I'm saying give them an option to present. I've monitored other federal advisory committees where that's part of their process. And I think the ACCV would be well served by making that a part of their process and making sure that their guidelines line up with understanding that the evidence that they're being presented with is a quality evidence. You know, was it already looked at by the IOM in that respect? I think that pretty much addresses most of the comments that you had, or most of the discussions today. And I want to thank you for all your work. I know I come on and I poke holes. I don't mean to poke holes, but we've been watching a long time. And we're here to help you make it better, too. We have the same concerns. And if we can participate and move this along in some way, we'd like to. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Your commentary is always appreciated. Operator, is there another call?
Thank you. At this time, we have no further comments, but as a reminder, please press star 1. At this time, there are no further comments.
Thank you, Operator. Okay. We have a lot of work to do. I'm looking forward to the email that will come out regarding the work group, the process work group, and I'll follow up with everyone on the recommendations and requests from Alexandra on future agenda items and requests for presenters. Is there anything else that anyone would like to say before we adjourn?
I don't know Brian Hooker, so don't think that. But everything he said was what I've been saying. Everything he's been saying is how I feel, and that's that's why I voted in December the way I did. Is that that's how Brian Hooker is obviously my close personal friend as of today. but he was much more eloquent than I can be. But I agreed with almost everything he said. The tick thing does bother me. I mean, Jeffrey has ticks. He won in the court, and he has ticks, and it just that bothers me that we did not have enough research on that. I always appreciate hearing from the public. They always have that. Yeah, it's always interesting.
Narayan, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm still here.
I'm just wondering if you would be able to follow up just on the comment from Teresa on who can and cannot serve in that parent position.
Certainly. Yeah, we'll look into that.
That'd be great. All right. It's been great talking with all of you. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 14th and 15th, so keep those open on your calendar for right now, and we'll be in touch over what kind of a meeting that will be, meaning in person or via telephone conference. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
None of us want to leave you, Beth. We don't want to. I'll do that.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Alexandra.
Thank you, Alexandra. And thank you, everybody. I look forward to working with you in the work group.
Thank you.
We'll talk to each other soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.